Hello! Thank you so much for giving this podcast a listen. As you can tell from the intro music, this will not be a standard episode of the Why Can't We Talk About That podcast. This is a special bonus episode, and that music you just heard is by none other than Chris Lambert, but more on that in a second. First, as always, I want to remind everyone to share this podcast with everyone that you know. Word of mouth is really the only way that others will ever hear about the show, so it's up to you to help me out. Secondly, I really love to hear from you. So please send me an email at whycan'twetalaboutthat@proton.me and tell me what you think of the show, tell me all your deep, dark secrets, or just say hi. Just hearing from you at all would really make my day. Lastly, I am always looking for people who are interested in being on the show. So if you, or someone you know, is interested, please reach out to me. Thanks. Now back to today's episode. As I already mentioned, this will be a special bonus episode that will take a break from the normal format of talking about music, politics, and spirituality. This episode will focus solely on music, and specifically Chris Lambert's brand new album titled Be Great that releases today. This is somewhat of a part 3, since Chris and I did 2 previous episodes that span his musical career up until this new album. So if you haven't checked those out yet, you can find them somewhere towards the end of Season 2. Similar to the format of those first 2 music episodes, we talk generally about how the album was created, and then we will talk about each song individually. Also, like last time, I have put song clips for every song on the album so that you can listen as well. Okay, well, no need for me to keep on jabbering. Please go and buy Chris's new album and let him know how you like it. And as always, enjoy the conversation. All right. Cool, man. Are we rolling?
We're rolling.
We're rolling.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just going to let you just kind of open up and just kind of tell me about... We'll get into each song like we did with the other albums because I have all the songs here and I have some notes on each song. But just in general... just kind of overall about writing the album. Obviously, it's been how many years since, was it 2018?
Yeah.
That the last one came out?
6.5.
Yeah. So, but you started writing it back then, but then everything with your own backyard and all that stuff kind of put that on hold for a while.
Right.
So yeah, just kind of tell me about the writing process.
Yeah.
Just in general.
Like my pattern since I graduated high school pretty much has been finish an album, put the album out, and usually by the time that album's out, I'm already starting the next batch of songs or starting to write new ones. So Constant Education came out in May of 2018, and I started writing the first songs probably the second half of that month. Mm-hmm. And so I think Next Time, Next Time, A Standard, those were together by like early June of 2018.
So those were 2 of the first songs you wrote?
Yeah, I think so. And then throughout the end of 2018, so probably from the time I put out the last one until the end of 2018, I wrote 9 or 10 of the 12 or 13 songs on this album.
Okay.
So the majority of it was written in 2018 in skeletal form, I guess. You know, the lyrics were not finished, and sometimes the structures changed, but generally the verses and choruses were together, and I was thinking of it as a follow-up album by that point. And I knew, so because I had done the Blue Hour, and then the next album was Constant Education, partway through writing that one, I started to realize, I just did this whole album about my past. Everything on there is pretty much unresolved issues about my past. And so the stuff that I'm writing now is focusing on meditation and presence, be here now, and all that stuff. Right. And I thought, I'm doing something really interesting here without even realizing it. Is I just made an album about my past, and now I'm making one about my present. If I follow through with this, that means whatever I do next should be an album about my future, and I could consider it a trilogy. This could be like my life trilogy.
So you didn't start out, like when you wrote the Blue Hour, you weren't starting out saying, I'm going to write a trilogy
not
about
at all.
past, present, future.
No, the Blue Hour was just in that moment. That was the album I wanted to make. And then Constant Education started out as this is just the next batch of songs I've written. But I started realizing, wow, I feel like I sort of maybe exercised some, in the demonic way, some feelings and some stuff I had been holding on to. And as a result of that, I'm much more at peace. I'm calmer. I'm interviewing people for Are We Okay? And I'm starting to learn about different lifestyles and belief systems. And I felt like it really brought me to a centered place. And so I thought, well, the whole crux of this album is that it's all about presence and being in the moment. So I thought that's interesting. A past album, a present album. And then, like I said, flashed immediately to, I think that means I got to finish this. If I do Constant Education then the follow-up should probably be another in line with these thematically, where I'm singing about myself and my feelings, and as opposed to, you know, I'd done Warp and Woof before the Blue Hour, and it was very conceptually, there's aliens and UFOs and road trips and stuff, and it's still about me, but Blue Hour was a naked, raw version of me, as was the next one. And so I thought, I got to do another one, and that one's got to be about my future, and instantly just panic, like, uh-oh, what do I think about when I think about future? Dying, like, you know, getting divorced, like I just immediately go to the darkest and worst parts, but also it unsettles me, and I get a feeling of just generalized anxiety when I think about what comes next. And so I thought that could be a very interesting thing. Hold that thought, finish Constant Education, and when that's finished, if the 2 albums play back to back as like a companion piece, you got to do a third part. So I knew early on that I was going to be doing an album all about my future at some point. And it was immediately after putting out Constant Education that I started writing the first songs about, you know, Next Time was one of the first ones that came out. And it was like, oh, this is cool, because the concept of the song is putting things off, waiting, procrastinating, and then worrying that, uh-oh, now I'm getting too old. There's some things I didn't do. I'm going to die, and I never did those things. And so I thought, well, that's a great start, because that's generally what I think the theme of the whole album will be, is just I'm a little bit afraid of what comes next.
Now, were you already doing Your Own Backyard when you wrote Next Time? Because I hear Next Time, and I think that's what you say at the end of every episode.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Yeah,
Next time.
I had never thought about that.
Oh, what next time? Wait, what?
That's a good.
Now, how about now?
Yeah, had not thought about that.
Oh, okay.
No, but
I almost thought maybe that played in, like it was and that's one of my notes I have when we get to that song specifically.
Yeah,
because I was wondering. I mean, I know the song doesn't seem to have anything to do with that, but just the title,
that phrase. Yeah, that's just a coincidence.
Okay.
But so the timing is, I put out Constant Education, I think on May 9th, 2018. On May 11th, I played the album release show at Boo Boo Records, and the next day is when I started reading about the Kristen Smart case.
Oh, wow.
And the timing was because this singer that I really liked in a band called Frightened Rabbit went missing. And they put out all this stuff like he's missing, and we don't know where he's at.
I mean,
yeah. This happened in May of 2018. And he's one of my favorite songwriters. Just really, I met him.
That band, Frightened
Rabbit. Yeah. They played with The National, who we also really like. And it was a band I introduced Allie to when we first started hanging out with each other. I was like, you got to check out Frightened Rabbit. And when she eventually got into them, she was like, I love this. And we listened to them on tour together and stuff. They were just a band I really connected with. And
kind of like indie rock kind of stuff? Or?
Yeah, and folk, and not too far off from what I do. But I met the singer. They played at Slow Brew. I saw them at Slow Brew, and I met him after the show and shook his hand, and he signed my ticket and stuff. And I thanked him, and he just seemed really like, oh yeah, of course. He was Scottish. Scottish band,
which is like the coolest accent you can possibly have.
Love it. And the way he sings with a very thick Scottish accent, I loved it. But he went missing in May of 2018. And I think that is what propelled me into reading about missing persons and stuff, and flashing back on, oh yeah, the Kristen Smart one, local to us, still never got resolved. What happened with that? That's when I started reading about it, the same week that I put out the last album. So it was simultaneous that I was beginning to research that case without even a thought of doing a podcast about it, just looking into it at the same time that I started working on the songs for this album.
This album.
Yeah. So May of 2018 is where both started. But then obviously writing those songs for the rest of the year while simultaneously researching and realizing, oh, I know some people who knew the suspect. I have some connections at Cal Poly. Maybe I could do a little docu-series about this. And so
just a little one.
Yeah. So that kind of
probably won't go anywhere, but just a small one.
That took priority at that point. And then through 2019, I was still doing the same thing, because I'm thinking, well, I'm still going to put an album out. That's what I do. Like albums are my thing. But right now, I really need to focus on this, so I make sure it's done well. And then once it comes out at the end of 2019, then I'll get the album finished. And then the rest of that story.
Yes,
it's just
I do.
Things changed dramatically in my life, and everything was different. And so these songs kind of had to get put on the back burner for a while. But they were always what I returned to. So like in the midst of everything that was going on with Your Own Backyard and it taking off and being on the news all the time and stuff. When I go home, I'm working on this batch of songs. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is the next album I'm going to put out because that's what I do.
Yeah, right. Just naturally comes out that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that because of the success of Your Own Backyard and kind of the national recognition you got for that is going to maybe make more people good look? Because we've talked before about how you got all the, what is this, your 14th? How many albums is this? 12th album.
Yeah, official
albums.
You have some I did that were not officially released.
Yeah. That's because I'm awesome.
Yeah.
But I mean, we've talked before about how, obviously, I'm a fan. I mean, I listen to this stuff, and I've always said to myself, man, why this guy get more recognition for the music and his great songwriting and all this stuff. But it just, other than locally, you don't really, a lot of people don't know of you.
Right.
I mean, I know you toured around and stuff, and there's probably some select people in certain towns and stuff.
Small little pockets.
Yeah, but it's not like you're, all over everything,
no.
Musically, like you were with Your Own Backyard. But I mean, do you think that because of Your Own Backyard, maybe more people are going to say, oh, this Chris Lambert, he's Your Own Backyard. Oh, he's a musician?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, I had no idea. What, 12 albums? Wait, what?
Yeah.
And then maybe that'll not only make people listen to this new album, but maybe they'll start going in the back catalog and, and listen to that stuff.
Yeah. I think there's not a lot of crossover, and the percentage is minuscule. I would say maybe 1% of the audience might come over. Mm-hmm. What I did, and I had promised myself I was going to do this one time and one time only, is when I officially, I put out the trailer. I always put out a trailer announcing my next album and when the release date is, and trying to give a general vibe of what you should expect with this album. And I'm sure you saw this one on Instagram or something at some point, that Allie shot all on Super 8 film.
Yes.
Yes. She got a Super 8 camera and filmed me working in here.
Yeah, that was cool.
Put that whole thing together. So when I posted that, I made myself a promise that I'm just going to go to the Your Own Backyard page, which still has like 100,000 followers, and I'm going to share that reel to Instagram, and I'm going to say, hey, just so you know, because people keep asking me, what's your next project? What's your next project? Just so you know, this is my next project. I'm very aware that you don't care. I'm very aware that this is not what you wanted to hear from me, but that's what I'm doing. I'm doing music. And so if you want to hear about my music, go follow this Chris Lambert music account on Instagram.
Yeah.
And if you don't, sorry to bother you, and you're never going to hear about my music on this account ever again.
Ooh, okay.
This is a one-time only thing. And from that, I got an influx of like 2,000 or 3,000 new Instagram followers.
Whoa.
But then, I post the pre-order and the album's available. Like, you can buy it if you want.
Right.
And almost none of them did.
Okay.
So the crossover between people who are curious was already much smaller than the people who didn't care or didn't follow.
Because probably when they're saying, what's your next project, they're looking for your next podcast about the next case of a missing person.
Hopefully murder. Like, they're always saying, like, I hope you cover the John Benet Ramsey case, or I hope you cover the Jack the Ripper stuff. And it's like, what am I going to do with that? I'm not the murder guy.
Right.
And so whatever I do next, even if it is a podcast of some kind, it's not necessarily going to be murder.
Yeah.
But so I don't know. Did you get a sticker on the CD I gave you? Did I give it to you sealed with a sticker on the front?
It was sealed.
Okay, so here's the promo stickers.
I don't remember the sticker, but
these are the promo stickers that I put on the front of everyone I'm selling.
Yes.
So it says at the top, it says in quotes, "Oh," and then it says, everyone who asked what I was going to do next when I told them a music album. Because I had a line of people come to meet me. Like, we did like a meet and greet in Arroyo Grande.
Right.
And people came up and cried, and they hugged me, and they were so sweet. And just, I've always wanted to meet you, and can I take a photo with you? Will you sign this thing? And every one of them that said, so what are you doing next? And I'm like, I'm finishing an album right now. Oh. They're so disappointed, and they couldn't even hide it. So, like, just the polite thing to do would be like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But they couldn't hide the look on their face like, oh, no, that's terrible.
Oh, what are you doing?
So I thought that's the pull quote to promote this album, is just
that is awesome.
Oh,
that's so awesome.
Yeah, nobody was happy about it.
Oh, my gosh.
But like I said, it's what I've always done. It's been what I've been doing this since I was like 14 years old now. Mm-hmm. And so it's been more than half of my life that I've been writing songs, putting out albums, writing songs, putting out albums.
Right.
And yeah, it's incredible that through this 6.5 years that this batch of songs remained, and that I didn't give up on it at some point and just go, no, those aren't good enough. I have other things in mind.
Yeah.
It was always about returning to this batch because I knew I liked it. I knew that it followed up the last two really well. I knew it was the closing chapter of this trilogy, and I thought, well, before I start writing new songs for whatever follow-up to this there is, I gotta put this one out. So
right.
yeah, we can get into the timeline and stuff of that at some point. But.
For sure. So another thing that I kind of, and I don't know, again, we haven't really talked much about my thoughts on this album.
Yeah.
I gave you a little bit of feedback, and I kind of wanted to save most of it for this, but I don't know if that's the vibe you were going for, but there's a lot of really kind of country sounding songs to me.
Huh, yeah.
As far as like all your other stuff. I mean, I know you've kind of dabbled there a little bit,
Yeah.
but there's like 2 or 3 songs, at least 2 or 3, if not more, that are very country sounding to
Yeah.
me. And was that something you were going for, or is that
Not intentionally.
Okay.
I think just, when I pick up an acoustic guitar, I don't really know what I'm going to come up with. I don't know what the next thing is going to be, but sometimes you start strumming chords and humming over the top of it.
Right.
And then, arrangement-wise, sometimes you can have a song that's more indie rock or more folk or something.
Sure.
And then you start thinking about arrangement-wise, what if I brought in some pedal steel guitar? What if I brought in some fiddle
Right.
or something? And then pretty soon you're like, yeah, this could be
Yeah.
a cool little country
Well,
thing.
there's one that's what they call it, a slide guitar. Is that what that's called?
Yeah.
That's almost what it sounds. I don't know if that's what you used or not, but there's
Yeah.
the one. I think it's
Do You Listen?
Do You Listen?
Yeah.
That one. Is that a slide guitar?
That's pedal steel.
Pedal steel. Okay.
So, on a few songs on this album, there's a pedal steel player that I hired. He's a session musician in Mississippi.
Oh wow.
And I think he's got one eye. Like, I'm not really sure because I
That's
just
cool.
saw pictures of him. But he's like one of the best pedal steel players in the world. He's
Okay.
just like incredible. And he was so fast. Like, I would send him the rough cut of the song set to like a metronome and everything, and just I would give him a rough idea of what I wanted, or I would do a little guitar solo and just be like, just kind of follow this generally, and he would have the track back to me the next day, and it was killer, like every time.
Oh, wow.
And so I would chop them up, I would rearrange them a
Okay.
little bit, but what he did was just like beyond what I expected.
So that's someone else playing that particular instrument that you okay? Because I saw
Yeah.
you have a lot of different players on
Yeah,
this one.
I hired session players for
Okay.
any song where there was an instrument that I just didn't want to, especially with drums. It's like I can play drums, and I
Right.
have played drums since I was like 16 or 17, but real drummers are better. you
Right,
know?
right.
And also just the hassle of setting up a drum kit in the studio and miking it up. You got to have like 10 mics, and then you got to mix them properly or they cancel each other out, and you have
Right.
sound issues. And it's like, I'd rather just pay somebody, $50-$60 and be like, hey, can you send me some drum tracks back? And they do, and then you drop them in and you're like, cool.
Nice.
But this guy in particular, the drummer on this album, Mark Strickland, so he lives in the Appalachians.
Oh wow.
And he's got his own studio, and so I would send him stuff, and he would send me an idea back. Like, he'd play over the top of my track, and then I would send it back with commentary over the top. So I'd let the song play, and I'd be like, okay, right here, like, I like that, but then when you go into this, could we wait and like hold that part, and then like if you could bring in some shaker right here or something, and then right here if you could do like a boom 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 boom, like
Yeah.
leading into that part. And I would walk him through, and he's like, dude, this is awesome.
Oh,
He
cool.
was like, because it's like we're in the same room with each other.
Okay.
And he's like, most of my clients, they just, I drum on a track and I never hear from them again. And he's like, and with you, you're like telling me directly what works and what
Right.
doesn't, and we'd have a song done in like 2 days of working
Yeah.
together.
I would say that could go either way, right? That could be him saying,
Yeah,
tell me
yeah.
what I did wasn't
Yeah.
good enough for you,
Diva.
Mr.
Yeah.
California.
No, but I think a lot of session players like him really appreciate the feedback,
Yeah.
because he's just doing, whatever popped into his head. He
Sure.
did a drum track on one, and I was like, love it, but it's not it. Like, that's not what I was looking for. And I'm like, I'm sorry I didn't explain this better, but I'm thinking more of like this. And so I laid out a drum machine for him and just sent him that. And I said, like, this, but less mechanical, like just your
Yeah.
own style of this. And he was like, awesome. Super easy to work with. So like all the session players that played on this album, we just communicated over the internet. And some of them are in other countries. There's one guy who's in Paris.
Yeah.
There's one guy who's in Serbia.
Oh wow.
There's
So
a
these
guy
are
who's
all
in
people
Brazil.
you've never actually met in person.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting.
And there's friends who sang parts and played instruments on the album too, but the session players is something I started doing with my last album with Constant Education. There's pedal steel on Be Here Now, and that was somebody in Israel, I think, played
wow.
on that one.
Wow.
And the fretless bass was the big, that was the big game changer for me, because fretless bass is one of my favorite instruments, but it's so difficult to play.
I bet.
And it's feel based. It's like violin, where you don't have frets, and so you're just listening, and you have to be good at it. And I had found this guy in Nashville who was really good at it, and he played on most of that album.
Okay.
So with this album, that guy was busy this time around, wasn't available, so I had to find a new fretless bass player, and I'm lucky I found a guy in Brazil.
And he was good too.
Who was very good and super easy to work with, and super grateful. Like, just really liked working on stuff. And every time I'd send him a new song, he's like, "It's you again." And so, it worked out really well with those
Very
people.
cool. All right, let's talk real quick about. Well, first of all, I want to tell you this. I was looking up, because we'll get to this in a minute, but there's certain songs that remind me of other songs, which I think I already told you, and I'll tell you which ones in a minute. But there was one that I couldn't remember the name of the song, but I remembered some of the lyrics. So I was looking up online. I went to the Bandcamp, and I was like, I know it's on this album, and like, you don't have like Warp and Woof isn't on Bandcamp.
It is, but it's under warpandwoof.bandcamp.com.
Oh, it's on a separate page.
It's its own band.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the process of that, I was like looking up, trying to find lyrics, right? For just because it was easier than listening through all the songs for me.
Yeah.
At the time, and that was just this morning. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go over there in like a couple hours. But I went to Discogs.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Discogs?
I've seen it.
Okay, so just so you know, I don't know if you know this, but you are Chris Lambert 5.
Oh, really?
On Discogs.
Yeah.
Just so you know. But you go to that page, and the only album on there is the Your Own Backyard soundtrack. Huh. That's the only one listed.
Yeah. And I don't know who does that. Like, I don't know who's in charge of putting those up. I know on IMDb, I'm Chris Lambert 16.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're better on Discogs. You're a little higher up the ranks.
That's cool. But they're missing my whole discography, so that
right. Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, I guess the number doesn't matter as much if you just have nothing. Why would on IMDb? It's not listing your music though. It'd more be listing
the credits that I got in movies for where my songs
score
were,
and that kind of stuff. Right. Okay. Very cool. So before we kind of delved into that, I wanted to kind of ask you about like the album cover and the artwork and that kind of thing. Like, where were we going for with that?
So I think early on I kind of pictured what I would like, and I knew that it's a challenge for me. You know me well enough to know I'm a very insecure person,
right.
And I don't like my face being on stuff.
Yeah.
But this, I started to realize thematically that even though this is an album about my future, that the real theme that was starting to come out lyrically was like, wow, I'm really pushing myself to try to be better, which is a thread that I think started when I've listened back now to the Blue Hour and like you got to get up and get better in the woodshed and stuff, and it's like this really has been the theme of this trilogy, is me trying to become a better person and evolve and be better, but always falling short and just feeling like I never quite get there, like I'm always disappointed in myself. But that same urge is, I think, what makes people accomplish great things. Having a drive inside of you that is completely self-motivated to be a better person is what keeps you trying. And otherwise it's like, who cares? Just do whatever you want.
So
and
the idea to put your face just so big on the front cover, was that like kind of you going against what you would normally do on purpose? Like, you're saying, I'm insecure, I don't really want my face, but instead of that, I'm going to go the opposite of that. I'm going to make my face just be the big picture in the middle of the album cover.
I think just as a challenge to myself, and like somebody pointed out to me at one point, they said, you're not on the cover of any of your albums. They're all just pictures.
Maybe in the liner notes you are sometimes, like showing
but the front cover, they're like, when you see it, you don't even know what you look like. And I was like, well, who cares? But then I start looking at other people's albums, and I'm like, I guess you're right. Like, most people are on their album covers. But I don't like being on an album cover. But when I did Constant Education, because it was about peace and meditation and mindfulness and stuff, I thought, I think it's time for me to be on an album cover.
Yeah, but then you put that pink.
Yeah, well, I'll get to that. So my concept for it was, I said it's a black and white photo of me, and I'm slightly out of focus. And in the foreground, there's going to be a smudge of pink paint on like a sheet of glass. I want to see the globs in it. I want to see the detail. I want it to be all about the paint, and I want me to be in the background, but clearly the shape of my beard and my glasses, like I'm recognizable in out of focus. And so I did it, and I had asked my friend who was a painter at the time if he would do it, and he kind of backed out and didn't really want to commit to doing it. And so I ended up just doing like a streak of pink. And then people started pointing out to me like, oh, you intentionally covered your face. You didn't want your face showing. You intentionally put this smudge in front of your face so we can't see you. And I was like, no, that was the idea. Was I was supposed to be in the background and the paint was supposed to be in the foreground. That idea got dropped, but I still wanted the same kind of concept.
Right.
So I wasn't intentionally obscuring my face, but that seemed to be what everybody took away
People
from it.
People gave you like criticism for that? Like,
they just thought it was me being like, shy or weird.
Okay.
It's like, why don't you want your face showing?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't like that. It was just, and plus Allie had done so many photos for that shoot and all of them were front facing. And at one point I kind of flicked my hair out of my face and she got me mid shot. And I thought, that's actually my favorite shot you got, is that my head is turned to the side and just slightly blurred a little bit. And so I'll just put the pink over that and that'll be the end. And so, a number of people pointed out, oh, I think feels like you intentionally covered your face. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do one. I'm going to do an album cover where I'm not covering my face and where I'm looking straight at the camera and stuff. And so she did a bunch of photos. And I told her this recently because up until this week, she had never even seen what I chose.
Right.
She took like 200 photos of me and just gave them to me and didn't know what I was going to do with them.
But
so
she knew they were for the album.
Yeah.
But
she just didn't know which one I was going to pick and what I was going to do with it. And so the one that I ended up choosing, I told her recently, I said, it's not a favorite, It's not like I picked the one that I thought, oh, that's super flattering. It's the one that I picked, it makes me a little uncomfortable.
Right.
And it's the one that I picked because I thought, well, this is definitely what I look like, whether I like it or not.
Yes.
There's no hiding.
Right.
I'm not making a face. There's no facial expression, really. I just look like me.
Right.
And so...
You look pretty serious, though.
Yeah. Well, I should.
You look like you're all about the business.
Yeah. But I picked it specifically because I thought it was the most representative of who I am at this point in my life. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like I love the way I look in this photo, but I reached out to a few artists and asked if they could do a thing, and a lot of them weren't available. And I suddenly got the idea that Allie's cousin, who lives in Santa Barbara, is a great artist. Okay. And I don't know him that well. Like we have met a few times and they grew up close. They used to go to family parties together and see each other at Christmas and birthdays and stuff. And they don't see each other as much anymore either. But she goes down to Santa Barbara when he has art shows, and she went up to his graduation and in the Bay Area. And so I just thought, I bet it would mean a lot to Allie if he and I collaborated on this together.
Right.
But she didn't know that.
Okay.
So I'll just,
That's awesome.
So I reached out to him, and thematically through the album, there was this thread about bees that kept coming back. I had a few lyrics about bees. There's a field recording of bees we can talk about when we get to that song.
Funny, I only caught the one reference.
Okay, yeah, you can hear actual bees in the song later
very
on.
Cool. Okay.
But so bees kept coming back, and the idea of how that ties into the idea of the future, the fear of the future. I was like, there's this idea that the bees are always dying off. They're always telling us the bees are dying off.
And 20 years now, yeah.
Yeah, and and it makes people afraid, and it makes people wonder, like, what's happening to the planet? What are we doing? And all this stuff. So I sort of channeled that into the bees being representative of the anxiety, the anxiety about the future and what's to come next. But I thought, well, because bees keep coming up, I want to incorporate that in some way. And I started seeing, when I did the Great Dipsa Drought, we talked about this on that episode when I was... Right. The number 828 kept popping up all over the place. Yep. And I thought, okay, I don't want to ignore that. That should be incorporated somewhere. And with this album, I kept seeing hexagons everywhere. And you know how honeycombs are hexagon shaped? Yeah. And I kept seeing them like in patterns, like people would just have a hexagon on the front of their house. Mm-hmm. Like, who has a hexagon shape? I'd see like hexagon shaped frames. Yeah. And especially when people had like 2 or 3 interlocked hexagons where they really start to look like honeycomb. Mm-hmm. I thought I really liked that. And I stayed in a few hotels, and they would have hexagon shaped shower tile. And so I kept taking pictures of them. I just love the way these look together. And there's something that reminds me about bees and all that stuff. So Allie and I went to the zoo a few years ago, and there was this big info board with all this information about bees, and it was like the buzz on bees. Did you know that bees pollinate? Whatever it says about it. But the whole background was all these different sized hexagons that are supposed to look like the honeycomb. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I'm taking a picture of this, and I'm going to send this to her cousin and just say, you work with this. Like, just somehow incorporate. I'm going to get Allie to take a photo of me, but I want the background, or I want the pattern to be honeycomb inspired in some
Okay.
way. And so he sent me a bunch of sketches. He did like pencil sketches. How about your face is in the middle and we do this around here? How about this? And he gave me a bunch of options to work with. And I picked this one.
With like the body of a bee with your head on it? That would have been kind of...
No, I wasn't going to go that far. But just something sort of like that. And so he had sent me this idea back where it's like, you know, you'll be in the center and then we're going to have like different colors of honeycomb around you. And then what if I did like these black swooshes that go over the top of you and they continue onto the back of the artwork, and the inside we have more of the little hexagons. And so that was the one I approved, and I said, but we got to wait for this photo shoot Allie's going to do because I don't even know what photo of me I'm picking. So the pattern came together first, and it was just a general placeholder of I will be in the center. I just don't know what I'm going to look like or which photo. So when she finally did the photo shoot and I was going through them, I was like, which one of these could I live with seeing all the time?
Right.
And I thought, well, it's not my favorite, but it is the one that looks the most like me.
Okay.
And it's not obscured at all. I didn't cover my face in any way.
You're right out there.
It's right out there.
Yeah.
And so anyway, her cousin did these embellishments over the top and sent me the artwork back 2 years ago now.
Okay.
So I've been sitting on it for 2 years, and I asked him, hey, don't tell Allie we work together. Okay, this is supposed to be a secret.
Yeah.
So then a lot of people that worked on the album, sang a little part, they've had to keep the secret for 2 years because it's like, hey, just Allie likes to be surprised by the finished product of an album.
Sure.
It's a tradition that we started with Phoebe when Phoebe came out, and we had been dating for like 6 months at that point.
Okay.
She didn't want to hear any of the songs until the album was finished. And then we sat on the floor of my studio and listened through headphones, and she cried. And then every album since has been like, the day that you sit down with me and listen to it is really like the finish line for me now.
That's so
is
cool.
like, what is Allie going to think of it?
Right.
And we started, I think, maybe 4 or 5 albums back, started trying to do a road trip. So it'd be like, we're going to drive to the middle of nowhere, and all we're going to do is listen in the car. We're going to crank up the volume, listen, and then when it's finished, we'll discuss it, see what you thought, and then we'll probably never talk about it again because that's it's not something we go back and discuss after the fact. And so the day of is the most important at this point. But with this one, to drag it out for 6 years and have her not know the whole time,
and you made
was really tough.
She was, for the most part.
We did make it at some point. I won't name names, but somebody accidentally had the thumbnail of the single on her car screen when she gave Allie a ride. And so Allie saw it in thumbnail form, and she's like, I'm sorry. Like I saw. And so, yeah, that was not a big deal, but still. So yeah, keeping all this stuff a secret.
Of the songs.
No.
She just saw the picture of the single for next time.
Right.
Okay.
And over time, she had heard. I think when I wrote the riff for next time, and I told her, this is what I'm thinking for my next album. Let me know if you think this is too out there, or just too different. And I played it for her at our apartment, and she was like, "Oh, I love it. Do something with it." So she heard that
long ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we didn't move out of the apartment until 2020, so these songs were almost all done before we moved out of there. Wow. I wrote all these at the apartment.
Okay.
And then, so I played her that riff, and then for Valentine's Day of 2019, I'd never done this before, and I'll probably never do it again, but I was like, I wrote a song about you. Would it be super cheesy if I played it for you? And so I sat on the couch with her and played her Even Then.
Okay.
When it was still just an acoustic idea. And I was like, here's a song I just wrote about you, and I played it for her.
Yeah.
And that was 5 years ago now.
And
almost
up to
6.
now, when she heard, she probably didn't know that song was going to be on the album.
She probably assumed, but I doubt she remembered it.
Okay.
You know, she probably didn't remember the melody. She probably didn't. She probably just remembered generally that it was a song about her and not leaving her and that stuff. But yeah, she hasn't heard it since.
Okay.
And so those were the 2 little tastes she'd gotten. And then at some point, I played Left on Loopin'.
Okay.
We were with a group of friends at the beach, and they asked me to play a new song.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, I'll play this one. So I played that one.
Was Allie there for that?
She was there for that.
Did you tell her to like go away for a while?
No, because I thought it'd be too weird. And a lot of times, even though it's a thing we've agreed on, it feels like I'm being a jerk if I'm like, Allie's not allowed to hear this.
Yeah.
People don't really know that we have this standing agreement that it's like she wants to be surprised and I want to surprise her. Yeah,
exactly.
And with this album in particular, obviously, I mean, she's in every song.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That there's 2 main themes that I'm seeing, and again, this is just me as a listener.
Yeah.
For the first one being her, obviously. I think more songs seem to be about her on this album, just like back to Phoebe. Probably more so than any album since Phoebe.
Yeah.
Am I saying the right name?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Not Chloe.
Not Chloe, right, because I always forget. See, I screwed myself with that. because I called it Chloe for so long just to be funny.
Yeah.
And now it's all screwed up in my head, and I can't remember which one it actually is when I start talking about it. So anyway, so that's the first theme, if you want to call it that. And the other one would be, it seems like, and I could be wrong here, but it seems like almost like you're kind of down on yourself in a lot of the lyrics, like kind of like you're disappointed with yourself. You haven't been moving forward as fast as you want to be, and that disappoints you. Like, I've never really heard you kind of, degrading is too strong a word. I'm not saying you're degrading yourself, but it seems like you're talking about your own shortcomings, your own failures, and your own kind of just your thoughts on that, you know, and being disappointed in yourself in a sense. Is that, am I on there?
But I do think that is more represented in my albums than you might think. Like, I think a lot of The Weatherman was the same way. I think a lot of The Weatherman was about me feeling inadequate, feeling like everybody's leaving except me. I'm stuck in this town, and Allie's gonna leave, and everybody else is left. And a lot of that album was masked because it's a concept album about a totally different story. But the theme of it was just me feeling inadequate. And then Warp and Woof, I feel like a lot of that was also the same, that it's like generally it's a concept album about being on a road trip with Allie and just being a super bummer. Like, she's like, this is romantic, we're together, and I'm like, that's where they shot Kennedy. Like, that's where they blew up the Trinity bomb, and like that's where they're hiding UFOs here, and they know we know, and stuff. And so I think a lot of that came out when I listened to Warp and Woof finished for the first time. I was like, wow, there's a lot of reckoning with who I am and how I am and what it's like to be in a relationship with me. So I think it's always popped up in different ways. But yeah, generally I think because this album is about, like I said, I realized as it rose to the top, the theme here that I did not intend was this idea of me trying to be great and always feeling like I'm not. Just feeling like being good enough isn't good enough. And I had written that, if you look in the liner notes of Constant Education, I used to leave Post-it notes for myself all over like the computer when I was working on the album and on my desk and stuff. And I would just write little inspirational quotes to help me focus on making the album. And one of them that I wrote is it said, good enough isn't good enough. And so the idea of not settling and just trying to be a better person all the time and just setting my goals for something unachievable and holding myself to a standard, which came out on here too. This idea of just wanting to be a better person and feeling like I'm not, and wondering what that means for my future. And since when I think about my future, I intend very much for Allie to be a part of it. I'd like to marry her. I'd like to start a family with her and all that stuff. But then I think, but what's it like to be married to me? You know, what am I going to be like to be married to? So there's.
Have you asked her that question? She'd probably answer that question better than you could about
I don't know if I would believe her answer. I feel like she'd be nice.
She'd be
too nice. Like, no, it'd be great.
No,
I'm like,
you
sure
guys have been together long enough.
We have. And
she'd be open and say, this is how I really feel, I would think, anyway.
Yeah, and she's had a lot of opportunities to jump ship. If at some point she's like, I don't want to do this anymore. But at the same time, I feel like some of this album is me being like, are you sure? Are you sure? And so that came out in different songs too. I think just generally the idea of trying to better myself is me coming to terms with the fact that I'm not as great as I'd like to be. I'm not in anything, I'm not, it's just like, I did this, but what about this? What I really wanted to do was this. And musically and stuff, it's like, I can put an album together. I have my own home studio. I can play most instruments by myself. But is it as good as the other stuff I like? The stuff I hear on the radio, or the stuff that I hear that just bowls me over, that I'm like, I'll never be that good. I will never be that good. And so I always feel like I'm short of that.
Is that okay to you, though? Like, because, I mean, there'll always be somebody that's better than us at something, right? Even something we're really good at. Like, you can be, I don't know, a sports player or a musician. You got, so many Grammys or whatever, right? And all this kind of stuff. There's always going to be somebody better. Right? There's always going to be somebody worse. There's always going to be somebody better. I mean, so are you okay with that, or do you feel like you're constantly striving for that?
I think it depends on the day. I think it's a feeling that never fully goes away, but most days I'm like, but I'm good. Like, I've come to terms a lot in the last 5 to 10 years with the role that I think I fill locally as a singer-songwriter. There's not all that many singer-songwriters in this area anymore, and so I think, well, of the ones that are here, am I the best? No.
Right.
Am I as good as most of the other ones? I'm not really sure.
Sure.
Like, but then I think I've come to terms more recently with this, like, well, but I fill a role that none of them do. There's something I do that none of them do quite as well. And I can't put my finger on exactly what it is, but all of us have our strengths. There's like, I could name names of people who play locally who are about on the same level of unsigned local independent artists who are playing shows or putting out music, that it's like, well, that guy's really good at this. I'm never going to be that good of a guitarist.
Sure.
I'm never going to be that good of a singer. This guy is so good at this. This girl is incredible at this. What do I do? And I've come to terms with that. Like, well, there's a Chris Lambert thing I do, there's something like if you were doing an impression of me or performing and like doing a parody song of me, there's definitely something I could put my finger on that's like, yeah, I guess typically I sound like this or I do this, and maybe that's my strength.
Yeah.
And so
there's a best you, right? Each of us has a best us.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe another person's their best them is going to be above our best us. If
right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So like I think our strive should be to be the best us we can be.
Right.
And we can't really go beyond that. I can't be as good as that guy because his is up here.
Right.
And maybe mine is down here, or whatever. So I mean I think that's probably more something worthy of striving for.
Yeah. Right. And like I'm talking about music, just music performance,
right.
But even in any walk of life, that's something that I think about a lot. And with being in a relationship with me, with getting married to me and stuff, it's like, am I perfect? Absolutely not. Like, do I have many flaws? Yes. But like, there's a quote from Good Will Hunting where they're talking about this girl that he started seeing recently and that he started avoiding because he's so afraid of, well, what if she turns out to be not this person I thought? And he's like, I got some news for you, buddy. She's not perfect. And you're going to figure that out. And he's like, but the question isn't whether or not each of you are perfect, but whether you're perfect for each other.
Yeah.
And that idea. And so in a relationship, it's like, well, we've proven, at least through longevity, that Allie and I work together, that there's something different than our past relationships. That's like, why couldn't we make it past a couple years with people before? And now, we're getting ready to go into our 15th year together. And so without being married.
Well, I can tell you from someone looking in from the outside, obviously not being either one of you, but just being around you all the times I've been around the two of you, is you're each two of the most unique people I've ever met. I mean that in a good way. Yeah. And the way that you guys fit together in that sense is, I mean, I've never seen that before. Like, so I mean, to say, are you guys right for each other? I mean, I think, like, I don't think you'll find anybody like that would fit into your life the way she fits into your life, and the same from her side. Yeah. I mean, just listening to stories that you tell me of trips you've taken and the things that you guys do and say, and it's just like, wow, it's just like, it's so, I mean, and that's why I've told you for years, I'm really excited to see what your children are going to be like. Yeah. To have that two mix of the genes in there and the DNA of both of you, like, it's just going to be really interesting to see like what kind of, and to see you guys as parents, I think is going to be really fun. Yeah. But anyway. All right. So we'll start with Hooray. We're going to just go through them in order. Sure. Obviously. Start with Hooray, which has become one of my favorites, which is interesting. I know the other day when I told you what my favorites were, this wasn't one of them, but this one's really, really grown on me. I hold my breath on the phone now. It's a new thing I'm trying. Apparently, I hold my chest when I sleep now. So I'll feel when I'm dying. I used to sit here for days and pray for a sign to create, or lay in the water and wait. Now I'm steering myself away. There's all these things I've been trying so hard to say, convey myself in a raw and honest way, control my life but pretend to not stay, convince myself I can change it in a day. So again, it sounds like I'm gonna let you tell me what you think, but I mean, it sounds like it's about getting older, Watching Time Pass, which seems to be kind of a theme in the album, maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of maybe tell me about that song, and then maybe you'll hit some of these things I already have here, and if not, I'll ask you a question.
Sure. So like, I started the Blue Hour with just like laying out my history, like just where I came from and all this stuff. And when I did, there was a little gap there between when I put out the Blue Hour and I just didn't have any ideas for how to start the next album. Like, what's the next album going to be? And the first line I wrote for Constant Education was, I think I've got a lot to think about. And I thought, perfect. That's exactly the start. And so when I wrote that song and I knew it was going to be the opener on the album, I wrote this opening line that was, it's happening again. I knew it would, but I still worry every time that it won't. And that's just about me trying to write the album and how tough it can be. Like, I knew it would come eventually, but I started to panic. I started to really worry. But I do that every year. Every time I start a new album, I'm like, what's the next one going to be? And so that was the first time I just laid it out raw like that. The album starts with, it's happening again. And so I thought, well, Be Great has to start with a mission statement of some kind. I need to lay out, here's where I'm at since we last left off. I didn't realize it was going to be a 6.5 year gap, but I just knew, well, here's where we left off. Like, here's who I am now, and here's what's changed about me. And at some point came up with this lyric, I hold my breath on the phone now, because it's so like, this is how my life has changed. Like, this is who I am at this point in my life, is a lot of dealing with a lot of anxiety, a lot of social anxiety, but also just in ways I never knew it could express itself. That, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, I was doing a phone interview with somebody, and I wasn't nervous or anything. We're just having a conversation. It was somebody I knew too. Yeah. And I realized every time I answered a question and they would start the next one, I was like completely out of breath. So I'd have to pull the phone away and be like, and over time it's gotten worse. Over time it's like, now every time I'm on the phone, I can't breathe. I'm just like,
unconsciously it just happens.
Yeah. And so I Googled it, like, what's wrong with me? And a lot of people were talking about, oh, this is a very classic sign of anxiety disorder. Right. And it's something a lot of people deal with. And separately from that, I've always been a kind of a worrier when it comes to health stuff or anything really. But in the last 10 years or so, I've started to have this issue where I would convince myself I was going to have a heart attack. Right. And I wouldn't even feel anything. I would just be like, oh no, I know it's coming. Like, I can just tell it's coming. Yeah. Or we'd be watching a movie and someone would have a heart attack and I'd have to get up and leave the room because it's like, for the next hour, this is all I'm thinking about. But there was one particularly bad time. We went to see a play together, Allie and I, with a friend. And in the middle of the play, I seriously thought I was having a heart attack. Oh, wow. And I think it was maybe a pinched nerve or something. Okay. Like, you get like a pinched nerve in your rib cage. Yeah. And it's like, when I would twist my neck, it would go away. And then when I'd let go and try to relax, I'd feel it again. I'm like, oh no. So I wasn't focused on the entire play. Like, I just couldn't think of anything else. We went to go to dinner afterwards and I told Allie, I just need to sit in the car for a while. Yeah. I think I'm dying. Yeah. And then
not take me to the hospital. I just need to sit in the car.
I just need to die in the car. Yeah. Yeah. While you're in Roadhouse Grill, I'll be dying in the car. So I called my mom and I was like, I think I'm having a heart attack right now. And she's like, please go to the hospital. I'm like, no, I won't. No. And so anyway, that has happened a few times. It's something that I eventually kind of learned to deal with that one. But it's another thing I noticed that when I Googled, they're like classic anxiety symptom. Sure. Like, that's something.
As is catastrophic thoughts.
Yes.
Which you mentioned earlier about always thinking the worst about everything. Yep. If this is happening, it must be this. Right. And we go to the far extreme. Yep.
Or like I've read, like symptom is impending sense of doom. Yes. Which is a general feeling of like, uh-oh. Yes. Uh-oh. Like you feel like a bomb's about to fall. And so I had no idea that so many of these things were just anxiety that I didn't know were all stemming from the same source. Yeah. And obviously, through Constant Education and that period of time when I was meditating and focusing, I wasn't dealing with a lot of that stuff. But because for the last few years, everything that happened with the case while I was working on it going to trial, me sitting in court all day, waking up early, staying up late, trying to, tweet things. Yeah. I completely stopped taking care of myself. And so all of those things are still right there under the surface. And so anyway, I just thought to open the album to open it like that, the very first lyric, I hold my breath on the phone now. And then to follow it up with, it's a new thing I'm trying, apparently. Right. Just like kind of sarcastic.
I love that. I love the apparently, the way the use of the word apparently.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're making a statement, but then it's almost like, apparently, like, I guess this is what I'm doing, kind of a thing.
I guess this is who I am now.
Right.
And then, I hold my chest when I sleep now,
Yep.
so I'll feel when I'm dying, apparently. And so I thought it's cool because it mixes a lot of different things. It mixes my sense of humor with my dark sort of just my tendency to go to the worst and to be pessimistic about things and all that stuff. But it also, like I said, starts the album with a mission statement of, hey, it's been a long time since we last checked in. And the last album opened with, it's happening again. I knew it would. And this album opens with, I hold my breath on the phone now. And I just thought, that's where I want to start this.
Okay.
So I knew that was the opening track. I knew that it was important for me to set the scene. So for me, that song is all about just what it's been like for the last few years to deal with anxiety. And when it comes to the future and planning for the future and all the stuff moving forward, how I've changed and how I'm also still very afraid that all these things come up all the time. And so
when you say cheering yourself hooray, or cheering myself hooray is what you say, is that sarcastic?
No.
In a sense?
No, I mean, I think it's supposed to be slightly dry and funny in that way, but it's basically me saying I used to look for external validation or think I wasn't good enough, and I don't do that anymore. Now now I'm cheering myself. Hooray. I thought, the hooray part is supposed to be a little silly, but, but it is a serious
It's not like a
statement.
cockiness, like,
No,
yes, I'm awesome.
Exactly.
It's more kind of...
It's the opposite. It's like, I'm cheering myself. Yay.
Okay. And then you have a lyric in here, control my life, but pretend to namaste.
Yeah.
That's kind of I had to look that up because the first thing I know I've heard that word a bunch. And I know it's another language, but the first thing that popped into my head, and I know you'll know this because we both watched Lost, but that was the thing whenever we show the videos of Dharma. Yeah. And I forgot the character's name, but the Asian guy that was on there and he would be talking. Yeah. He'd always end with that or start with it or namaste or whatever. And it's like a greeting or whatever. Yep. So I mean, what's going on there? Like what's kind of
So my understanding is that phrase translates to like the being in me sees the being in you or something like that. It's or something like that. Yeah. But basically it's kind of been co-opted by like white women that do yoga, that sort of thing. They just say namaste to each other, and
they probably don't even know what it means.
Yeah, and in the same way that the word Zen is. So, like you can see, like I've got Zen books up here. Right. Like I started getting into Zen stuff when I had a guest on Are We Okay? He's like 82 now, but he's in really good health. And he's a lifelong Zen Buddhist.
I see him at the library all the time.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy. He's a composer. Yeah. He's a daily journaler, which I also started getting into about 10 years ago. So we connected on a lot of things like that. And I thought, this is really cool. And he's like, you should check out this book. It's called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Okay. And it's basically just about trying to return to that place, that space in your head where, remember when you were first learning how to walk? Remember when you were first learning how to talk? Remember when you were first learning how to write songs? How excited you got and how there was infinite possibility. Right. And then over time, you start to limit yourself and the world starts to limit you and you get boxed into this way of doing things. Well, if you can return to beginner's mind and remember what it used to be like for you, it's kind of a pure way to return to that mindset. Nice. And so... anyway, that set me up. But the word Zen in general, I feel like has also been co-opted. When people say Zen, they think it just means like, you're really feeling a sense of peace now. Right, like you're really in your Zen. Yeah. And so it's like, well, that's a very basic way to look at what it actually represents and stuff. So I think namaste is another one of those words. And so what I was saying in that lyric is basically, I spent all of Are We Okay? And all of Constant Education is a lot about finding my peace and being Zen and all that sort of stuff. But I'm also a very deeply anxious person who's like stressed out and depressed and all the things that I've dealt with. And so it's like I'm always trying to be in control, but then outwardly trying to pretend like I'm just namaste, Right. And so that lyric basically calling myself out for that. It's like I outwardly am trying to appear to be peaceful, but on the inside it's just like a storm. Okay. And if I'm being completely honest, I really, really have a hard time not controlling things or not in a not in a controlling sense, but just being out of control when I'm going to a thing, right? So I'm going to a show the other night, a concert, and I didn't know where to park. I didn't know how many people were going to be there. I didn't know where I'm supposed to sit. I don't know what's required of me.
Yeah.
And now the new layer is, am I going to be recognized? Are people going to say, hey, I saw your thing? Or they're going to come up and talk to me, which is fine, but it just adds another layer of like uncertainty about everything I do. So sometimes I just stay home because I'm just so worried that there's so many things that I am not in control of that I just have to walk into, that I just avoid stuff now. And that's anxiety too.
Yep,
that's social anxiety.
That's where the agoraphobia starts with.
Yeah.
That's what, when I went through I'm still going through it, but I mean, when I hit the prime peak of my anxiety, that's what eventually led me to get help. Was the agoraphobia aspect of it. I didn't want to leave my bedroom. Yeah. Because your world just gets so small because there's all these places that you start taking out and say, well, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there because of this, because of this, because of this. And pretty soon you have nowhere to go. Yeah. And you're just stuck in the, and I became this person that I would see in the movies that I used to laugh at. Yeah. Look, they painted out funny. Oh, look at this guy scared to leave his house. What a what a weenie.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to my friend the other night. She she's in her late 20s and so significantly younger than I am, and just got her own place, and picked her up to go to the show the other night. And when she got in the car, she said, do you notice as you get older that you just are so comfortable at home that you never want to leave? And I was like, oh, buckle up. Buckle up. When you've got, we own our own house. I love our house. We've got a fountain in our backyard. We've got a huge backyard. I've got a studio back here. Our living room is very spacious and wide open. We've got a lot of great light. We got a puppy, and we get along. And so it's like, I love being home.
It's your happy place.
There's almost nothing that I'd rather do than be home. And so when I do, like the other night, go to this concert in San Luis Obispo, it's like, I got to drive there. People are going to want to say stuff to me. I am going to be awkward. And that's really where the anxiety comes from, is not people talking to me, but am I going to handle it well? Or am I going to give them the impression that I'm a super awkward person, or that I'm mean, or I'm rude, and I'm just in my head the whole time. So it turns into an ordeal when it shouldn't be. Yeah. And so, of course, I'd rather stay home all the time. And so, that's a new thing too.
Okay. So as I already kind of talked to you, I mentioned it before because I got really excited when I heard it. I think I texted you like right after I listened to this song, Hooray, is at the end where with the gasoline. It's got the melody for Gasoline, which that's of Constant Education or Blue Hour?
Blue Hour.
Blue Hour, okay. So is there a reason why? Is that supposed to connect, or was that just a little thing you threw in there to see if anybody caught that?
I don't think anybody's going to catch that. I think when you pointed it out, I was like, yes, you're probably the only person that's going to notice that. But it was basically, that was the very first song on the Blue Hour. At the very end of it, I start playing that riff. Okay. And then it trickles into track 2 where it becomes the main riff of track 2. Right. But it appears in the very first song on the very first album of this trilogy. Okay. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool? I just had the chords trickling out and some piano stuff. Right. And then over the top of it, I was like, let me just try. Let's see how this riff sounds. And when I played it, I thought, that's cool to me because it's a little callback. But I also messed it up. So like this right here on this desk is an open reel-to-reel tape machine from the 70s, right? And I got this at some point because I've always wanted to try tape, but I don't know how to do it. Yeah. And I thought, this is the time when I'm just like starting over again and have my own studio. So I recorded the little riff and I put it on this, and then I just messed with it. Like I put my finger on the top of it and let the tape drag, or I'd like crinkle the tape up, and it kind of does that when it's coming back through. So when you hear that guitar riff at the end of Hooray, which is the guitar riff from Gasoline on the Blue Hour, it's also like warped and messed up. Okay. So I thought that was kind of just symbolic in some way, that it's like that this is still in here. This is like thematically tying this thread through these 3 albums, but now it's like garbled and it's not as clean as it was back then.
Yeah, because it was, I knew it as soon as I heard it, but I didn't know what song it was. Oh, okay. So I immediately stopped it. Again, I only heard the one song. Yeah. I hadn't heard any others. Stopped Be Great, went back, and I was like, I know this is one of the later albums. I can remember what album it was on. Yeah. And it was on one of the later ones. And I literally was listening through each one. And then I got to Gasoline and I go, that's it! There it is! And then I wrote it down. Okay, it's that one. And there's another one like that too. And I might be totally wrong on this other one I'll tell you about when we get there. Yep. But the last thing on Hooray, I was looking through your instruments which is hilarious. I love the things you write. So on this one, I noticed Creole seasoning shaker.
Yeah.
So that's real.
Mm-hmm.
Like you actually have now. Do you find that Creole seasoning works better than say oregano or?
Not specifically. I mean, I've always used kind of found sounds.
Yeah.
I always like to play like random objects as instruments. Like I was just showing you this.
Yeah.
Is a can of pretzels that I played as percussion on one song.
Yeah.
And so I think what it was is I went into the kitchen and I opened the spice drawer and was just looking for something that would make a good sound.
Mm-hmm.
I had like the Morton salt shaker, and it's like, nah, that's too heavy, and it's just the sound isn't right. So I just kept shaking things till I found one, and it's that Tony Chachere's Cajun seasoning, which is my dad's. My dad is Cajun, and so my dad is big on that seasoning. We've always had a can in our house, and so I just shook it, and I was like, that's it. That's the sound I'm looking for.
Nice.
And I thought that's kind of funny because I could just put shaker, but it's funny that it's actually a can of Creole seasoning,
because then it pays homage or homage, depending on how you say it, to your roots.
Yeah, in
at
some
the same
way.
time.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
But it just sounded the best of all the things I
It does. It stands out.
Yeah.
Because if it just said seasoning, or if it just said, even Italian seasoning, it's like everybody's got Italian seasoning. Who has Creole seasoning?
Yeah.
All right. So next track is Next Time, which we kind of already talked about the title.
Yeah.
And that was the first single that you released.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just do this with all the songs. I'll just have you kind of give me the background, and then because you're already answering a lot of the stuff I had written down anyway.
Oh, okay.
So that helps me just cross those off, and then I can just move on to what I want to ask if you don't answer it.
Sure.
But yeah, so just kind of tell me the making of that one.
So that was, like I said, that was one of the first ones I played for Allie at the apartment. It was probably June of 2018, very early on. Played her the riff, and I was like, I came up with this, and it's just that opening doo-doo, doo-doo, doo, doo-doo, doo. And I said, Nick just kind of goes into some open strummy stuff, and I would sing like da 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 da, and I didn't have any words for you, and I just wanted to know what she thought, and she really liked it.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, I like that. It's kind of a good start for what the tone of the next album will be. I also always knew, because Constant Education was about presence and stillness and peace, there's not a lot of percussion on that album, if you've picked up on that. A lot of it is finger picking. There's only one song on that album with drums, I think, and the rest are just body percussion, me slapping my thighs and stuff. But because of that, it doesn't move. It's a very still album thematically and sound wise, rhythmically. So on this album, it's like, it's time to start moving, right? It's about moving forward and going into the future. I got to bring back drums. And so I knew that I wanted more of that style. So when I started playing that riff, I thought, this is cool, because it's a more upbeat rock sound than I've done in the last few albums, but it's still, because thematically what the songs are about, and that it ties into the trilogy that way, it will still fit. Right. So I struggled with that, though. Like, how does this song fit on the album? Because it does stand out a little bit as like a louder rock song. Okay. And so yeah, I've been working on it for 6 years. I wrote different lyrics to it, different sets all the time. The chorus was always the same. Save it for the next time around. Right. I'm hanging from a necktie.
Yeah. Which is that a reference to like a 9 to 5 kind of job? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just going to work every day, and I'm a slave to this, that I've got to do this, and I'm putting stuff off that I actually want to do. So I always liked the concept, but I could never get the verses right. And I always knew that I wanted to go for like a Paul Simon you know how Paul Simon writes lyrics that when you listen to like Graceland or something, I don't know how into Paul
That's
Simon you
my
are.
favorite album.
But there's lots of like I said, there's dry humor and clever wordplay and stuff. And I just thought, man, the way he sings stuff, if I could sing about putting stuff off or procrastinating with a sense of humor to it, throw in some like not silly lines, but just kind of like unexpected or whatever. I would love to do that. So it took me a long time to figure out how to do it. And when I was really happy when I came up with that line, I read a thing that said the bees are dying off. And if the bees go, then we go too. I thought it's so Paul Simon.
Okay.
But it's exactly what I'm talking about. The anxiety, the future, what's going to happen, not the uncertainty of it all and the fear. And so it brought all those things back in. But I played with it over time. Like for a while, it was a slow song. Tried it just acoustic. Right before we moved out of our apartment, the very last thing I did when the apartment was empty was I sat on the floor and recorded on my phone just a little demo of this song with just like a marching drum in the background. So it's just like, and just playing this song kind of doo-doo, doo-doo, doo. And I thought it was kind of neat, and I was like, this is a neat thing to do with it. But every time I went back to it, I'm like, no, this song has to be upbeat. It just has to. So when I finally got the session drummer to lay his part down and I heard what he did with it, I thought, I just need to embrace that this is what the song wants to be.
Right.
And it is a rock song, and came up with some cool little keyboardy parts I'm pretty proud of. There's this instrument over here called the pocket piano. It's like a metal box.
I have it written down.
Toggles.
I have it right here.
Yeah.
In the instruments for this one. I was going to ask what that is because I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So it's like, I'll grab it.
It's like Elton John has a tiny dancer. You have a pocket piano.
It's like it's a wooden box that's encased in metal, and then the keys are actual wooden toggles that you push. And you
Interesting.
can hear how they sound. And then all these change the settings of like the attack and the decay and the sustain on each note. Okay. And then you can flick through different settings this way. When you push that, it changes the color of these lights here, which the battery just died.
You need a battery, yeah.
But anyway, so it's laid out like a keyboard, and you just play it like any other keyboard, but it has a really cool sound to it. So I played that. It's the thing in the background that goes boo.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I really like the way that added to the song.
Yeah.
There's some cool stuff I did in there percussion wise. There's just a plastic cassette box that I slammed shut on the beat, and then I chopped it up and used it as like a snare drum. So instead of just like a snare on every beat, it's the little cassette case slamming shut, which I thought was a cool sound.
That's gotta be so fun to do that. I mean, it's just to look around a room and be like, oh, what could I use for this? And then you do it, and then it sounds cool, and you're like, oh man, I'm gonna put that in here.
And sometimes it's just stuff I try, and then I'm like, let's see how this is. No, that doesn't work. And other times it's things that I always know. It's like, I know what I'm going to do for this one. I know that I want this sound in there somehow.
Right.
And I love the sound of a plastic cassette case slamming shut.
Okay.
It just has such this click to it.
Yeah.
But you also hear the little squeak when the door shuts.
Right.
You know, squeak.
Right. Especially because one day your kids are going to go, what's a cassette tape?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And
I mean, my kids would even say that at this point.
Yeah.
You know.
I've got a cassette collection on our shelf, so hopefully they grew up listening to cassettes just like I did. But,
okay.
So anyway, little things like that.
Yeah.
But this song, stylistically and all that, it went through a bunch of different changes and kind of came back around to what I always intended. It's an upbeat rock song about procrastination.
Yeah. And I'm not a dancer in any way at all, but I do kind of bob when I get something going. This one makes me do that for sure.
Nice. I told Allie recently, she had never heard of the Replacements before. She knew the name, but she had never listened to the Replacements.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you got to listen to the Replacements. And I didn't tell her why, but it was like, I have a few Replacement songs on this album. Yeah. Did you ever get into the Replacements?
No.
So they have an album called Let It Be that was a huge hit, which is just a joke because the Beatles album is called Let It Be. So they're like, this one's called Let It Be.
Oh, they didn't cover the song?
No, not at all.
Okay.
They just called the album Let It Be.
Okay.
But they have another album called Tim that I really, really like, and I've always gone back and listened to it, but it's not something that I've listened to with Allie. I just didn't think stylistically she'd enjoy it. But I made her watch a documentary about it last month because I was like, you got to get into the Replacements so you can kind of hear what I'm coming from. But they're sort of like an 80s slower punk band. They definitely came out of the punk scene, but they started playing slower, and they're more... They have some ballads. They play a lot of like 12-string acoustic guitars on their stuff and all that. But it clicked when I realized, oh, Next Time is kind of like a replacement song. If I approach it that way, I definitely think there's a way to do this, and I think that's how it turned out on the album.
Cool.
So
awesome. All right, Waiting at Home is the next one. So this is the one where you've got the answering machine beep.
Yeah.
Right, going through the whole thing, which is kind of cool. And I love at the end how it just keeps going. And and the first time I'm listening, I'm going, is this ever going to stop?
Right.
It's going to be like minutes and minutes and minutes of this beeping.
Yeah.
1:50 p.m. Friday.
I guess you cut your hair and you want me to notice. I see you way out there. It's dark inside my head. And I wanna be great. Ooh, I'm not good enough. I hate it when you stare. I feel like you know this. When I repeat myself, you listen twice instead. When I wanted to quit, ooh, you knew I couldn't have. Hey, I've been working like a dog, like 3 hours a day. You know that I'm just walking in a fog whenever I go away. And the woman I love is waiting at home for me.
But it starts with saying, 1:50 p.m. on Friday, and that's obviously you're checking your messages, is what I'm gathering. Is there a significance to that date and time, or just
Nope.
you just threw something in there?
Yeah, I found this little mini cassette that was already had answering machine messages on it, and that was on there. And so I just played it through my little mini cassette player into Pro Tools, and then chopped it up and put it on the beat. So the beep happens every other 4 count or whatever.
Okay.
I just like the way it sounded.
Yeah.
Answering machines, I grew up with answering machines that took cassette tapes.
Yeah, for sure.
We've moved away from that now, but I
Yeah.
still like the way they sound.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought it was nostalgic, but it's also something about the beeping. I also feel the same way with like those heart monitors in hospitals.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes they can really add an element of some nostalgia or something to the background of a song.
Right.
It can be a little heavy sometimes, and you just
Yeah.
play an acoustic guitar over the top, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
So I played the beep, and then I strummed the acoustic guitar
Yeah.
over the top, and I thought, I really like the way those two things work
and it
together.
goes through the whole song.
Yeah, it never stops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So this song again seems to be it's kind of the same theme, right? Talking
Yeah.
about Allie, the woman I love, waiting for me, waiting at home for me, or,
Yeah.
or whatever. Is that's talking about the future in hopes that one day you guys will be married with kids and that kind of thing?
It started with I started writing this one when I was on tour for Constant Education. So I did a 2-week tour with a friend of ours who played drums for me, and Allie had helped book the tour or entirely booked the tour. It didn't help. And we went out for 2 weeks and played all these shows, and then
Yeah.
came back. And while I was in Cedar City, Utah, we stayed in somebody's basement, and I picked my guitar up and started playing. And that's typically how I write songs. I just have a guitar in my hand and then come up with a thing. And I started playing this song about the woman I love is waiting at home for me.
Okay.
And so it started out that way, which is just like, I miss her, and like I miss being at home and stuff like that. And she's just doing her own thing and waiting until I get back and all that.
Right.
But obviously, after Your Own Backyard and everything that happened, and then me moving to Monterey County for this trial, it kind of took on a completely new meaning. It was like, wow, we really are like, we're living separately, and she's waiting at home for me,
Yeah,
and all this stuff. And so I started to realize this is sort of a universal thing that I'm dealing with, is just anytime I'm away from her, I get homesick and I want to be around her and stuff. And in the meantime, she's pretty cool about it. She's pretty accepting and allows me to go do stuff like that. And there's no fear. At no point in our relationship have I felt like, oh, we're drifting apart because we don't see each other enough.
Right.
It's like we always have made time for each other. And even when she moved away to go to college for a few months, we made it work.
Okay.
And so I think it's just about that. It's just about the idea of being away from her and missing her. Yeah.
And working like a dog 3 hours a day, which is funny because you think working like a dog is usually like, oh man, I worked a 12-hour shift today or whatever. Like 3 hours is like, that's what you work when you're 15 and you're working at Taco Bell or something, you know? So like, is that?
I think it was both my way of saying like, I'm so exhausted, which is true. It's like, I'm just so wiped out. And then how dare I complain to somebody who just stood on her feet for 9 hours shooting someone's wedding. And then she comes home and like, you don't even know.
Yeah.
For like, for a little bit of time today, I did some hard work and then didn't. And so I'm, again, calling myself out in the moment. That's like, I am really wiped out and exhausted. That part is true.
Okay.
But how dare I compare that to anybody doing real work? And so.
Oh, that's funny. And then instruments on this one, you got Suitcase.
Yep.
And then Stan's Gold Pan.
Yeah.
Now, is that a person?
Yeah.
Is it literally a gold pan that belongs to somebody that you know named Stan?
Yep. Well, it belongs to me now. He gave it to me.
Okay.
Stan Smart is Kristen Smart's dad.
Okay.
And the very first time I met him and we were just getting to know each other, he told me about how much he loves gold panning. And he was telling me about, he went up to the river and got a nice chunk of gold, which is nice. And sometimes you don't get anything, and sometimes you come back with a little flake of gold. And it came up over and over that this is what he does in his spare time. He likes to fly remote control airplanes. He likes to go hiking and camping with his son, and he likes to go gold panning. And so a few years into knowing them, I stayed with them for a little while, and at some point someone suggested we should go gold panning together. So he took me out to gold country. I'd never done this in my life before, and he had these, I don't know, I'm looking for it, and it's right over there. It's sitting on top of a box full of stuff. Yeah. So it's a very old, rusty gold pan. I have no idea how long he's had this gold pan.
It's kind of like a wok.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's got ridges in the top that are meant for catching the gold flakes. So you swish the water around in it. You're trying to get the silt out of the bottom, all the like black sand that comes from the bottom of the river.
Yeah.
Trying to get that out, but keep the gold in because it's heavier. Okay. And so he taught me the right technique, and he'd be like, no, you got to do this or you're going to lose all your flakes. Yeah. And so he taught me how to gold pan when I was done. He said, take this home with you.
Oh, nice.
And it's like, well, there's no gold rivers around where I live, but sure, I'll take it and hang it on my wall or something.
Right.
So I brought it into the studio, and the first thing I did with it was like, what if I just tap on this with a drumstick? And it kind of sounds like a cymbal.
Because you would.
Yeah. And so, I put the song together, and the kick drum is basically, it's one of those big old shell suitcases that my family has had forever. It's blue, and we used it all when I was growing up. It's probably from the 60s or 70s.
Okay.
And when you hit it, it's very hollow, thumpy sounding.
Right.
And so that was the kick drum. And so I thought I just need some kind of little hi-hat sound. And I saw the gold pan, and I was like, that's what I'm doing. And so I looped that through.
Okay.
So all of the drums in this song are me just tapping on random items that I had around.
Nice. That's so cool. And again, we talked before in the other 2 episodes we did about your music, but that you like being able to write that in. Like you use certain instruments like, oh, I just want to be able to put in there. I use whatever, pots and pans or spoons and forks or whatever, it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. You put Stan's Gold Pan.
Yeah. I was just going to put gold pan, and I thought, well, the fact that it stands is significant in many ways to me. The fact that me getting to know this family is kind of intertwined with my life now. Right. And so, you made it into the album just by virtue of giving me an object that I could hit.
And mysterious at the same time, because people read that and they think,
yeah, a lot of people
like
want
a brand. Is it like a Stanley Cup, but it's like a Stan Gold Pan? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
All right. So next is Even Then.
Mm-hmm.
All my life, I was trying to find you, just to try and remind you what we were supposed to be. Then one day, something pointed me your way. I got a foot in the doorway. Now I don't wanna leave. So I'm gonna stay till the smile on your face goes away. to say, yeah, probably even then.
I don't have a whole lot written on this one.
Yep.
I enjoyed this one.
Then
But
another one I wrote in probably summer, fall of 2018, and
Okay.
like I said, Valentine's Day of 2019. Played it for Allie in person, sitting on the couch next to her, which I'd never done before. I think that's so embarrassing and
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Even with her.
And yeah.
Okay.
It's I never want to sing to somebody. There's also this whole idea of like men with acoustic guitars who sing at you. Like
Right.
if you saw the Barbie movie, there's
I
a
still
scene where-
haven't.
There's
It's
a
on
scene
the
where
list.
Ken is singing at her, and then
Okay.
all the Kens are singing at all the
Yeah.
Barbies, and they just have to sit there and listen. And just how humiliating that can be.
Yeah, but what about Wedding Singer? That's a good scene when
Yeah.
he comes out saying, I want to
love-
grow old with you, and he's
Yeah.
singing specifically to
Yeah,
her.
I
right?
think so.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a little vulnerable and uncomfortable at times. But so anyway, I wrote this song, and basically it's just a song about the idea that assuring her that I have no intention of leaving her.
Right.
And so the sort of punchline in this one is like, I'm going to stay till the smile on your face goes away.
Yeah.
And probably even then.
Right.
So like even when
Yes.
you're unhappy, I'm not going anywhere.
Well, that's what I wrote. Actually, this song seems to be about a love that will last no matter what, through happy and sad times, and even through getting older, because you say something about more gray, less hair, right?
Oh, that's the next song.
Oh, is that the next song?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this one, what is the lyric? To think you met me with pimples, I'm
yes,
going gray at
there
the
it is.
temples.
Okay, there
Yeah.
it is. Yes. Yeah. It's really cool. Did she take it that way? Like, did she?
I don't know. Like,
Okay.
I never really know what
You
she's
played it, and
thinking.
then you just like slunk away somewhere. You're like, I don't even know what she thought about.
Yeah, she was probably crying at the end, and then we hugged, and then like, what do you want to watch?
Yeah. That's
So,
awesome.
yeah.
So funny. All right, and then we're going to track 5 now, Down the Line.
Well, way down the line, I could buy us a home. It could take me some time, some hole in the wall, so that I can afford to pay for it all. More stress, but less mess. More blessed, but less rest. Then way down the road, when we live in the home, we can lighten the load. That hole in the wall, where we can avoid the weight of it all. More change, but less fear. I'm holding back here. 'Cause I don't need to let you go to find that I was wrong the whole time. When I can barely open up my eyes to see something from both sides.
I wrote another one about getting older, time passing by. It seems like
Yeah,
that
I
seems
guess-
to be a very prominent theme.
Yeah.
But then I think you mentioned again not having kids in this one, right? You mentioned that a few times.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
so.
it might be this. I might have messed up the lyrics on that one again.
Yeah. This is another one. Like, I did this on the last 2 albums where like I'm trying to write about presence. So what are some keywords that pop out when I think about remaining present? And that's where Be Here Now came from, was
Right.
okay, be here now, like being in the moment, the whole rabbit in a river concept and stuff of things moving around you. And so I wrote a bunch of keywords for this one about the future. It's like, what are some words that mean the future and next time and
Right.
tomorrow? And for a while, the temporary title for this album was going to be Songs for Tomorrow.
Okay.
Because I just thought it's a collection of songs about what's to come. And so I had written this one, and it was just called Someday. It was just this idea of someday. So it's like a song about reminiscing I guess not reminiscing, but fantasizing about what our life could be.
Yeah.
And so the first line I wrote was, way down the line, I could buy us a home. It could take me some time. And it was the idea of, I'd like to be something, and I like the fantasy of us being able to buy a house, even though it's going to have to be some hole in the wall for us to afford it. But please, let me, give me that opportunity.
Right.
So this was years before we actually bought this house.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I finished this album, we already live in the house now.
Oh, how funny.
And I'm fantasizing about maybe someday I'll buy us some hole in the wall. And so, it was just a song about laying out what I would like the future to look like, even though I'm not sure it will.
Sure. Okay. All right. And then Blow. This one's a little harsh, man.
Yeah.
It's a little dark on this one.
Yeah.
I was, I could blow my brains out and,
Yeah.
I'm being right now in a couple of ways, and I'm off to the better room. I'm awful now, I can't defend my move. Stop to write the words, and I'm a couple away. When I start thinking better ones, I'm all torn up, I can't get in my groove. But I would blow my brains out, love, if I could throw my dreams out, love. But that don't matter at all. That don't matter enough to change me. Your love won't matter at all. Your love won't matter enough to change my mind.
So what's going on in this one?
I don't know.
Not sure.
This was one where I came up with the whole song, melody and all, and had just no words, just no idea what this song's going to be about.
Okay.
I just really like this melody, these chords and stuff. And then I came up with that little, I don't know if it's a pre-chorus. It's kind of a strange structure. It's like, I guess it's the chorus, or maybe it's the pre-chorus and the next part is the chorus, where I say, I would blow my brains out if I could throw my dreams out.
Okay.
But I can't. And so it's like the thing keeping me alive is that I have ambition. Like I
Right.
want to do stuff. And so otherwise I have nothing to live for. It's just like, it's the idea that I can be great, that I have something to look forward to, something to do. But when I started putting it together and the lyrics I started putting together, like, what am I trying to say here? I realized a lot of it is about just the way that Allie and I argue, just our different styles. And it's like when we have an issue come up, I want to hide and I just want to be alone. I just need alone time. It's just, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to talk right now.
Yeah.
And she's just like, we need to talk nonstop.
That's funny. That's me and Bethany are the same way, except I'm the alley person.
Oh, really?
Yes,
That's
Bethany's
funny.
I need to go alone somewhere.
Isolate.
And I'm like, no, because I know if you go away, we're never going to come back to this.
Yeah.
We need to finish it now while it's fresh in our minds. We need to get to the bottom of this.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I just started laying out like how difficult I am to be with. It just, again, like just understanding or taking responsibility for the way that I am and how difficult it can be to work with me, but knowing that it's also just kind of, and I sang in Even Then, which we already talked about. There's a lyric in there about I've got a way of making things sound grave, and I want to say that I'm sorry, but it's just who I am.
Okay.
A lot of it is just coming to terms with, and also just, I guess, bringing to Allie's attention, it's like, you kind of know what you're in for, right? If we are going to get married, or we are going to be together, you know what you're in for. You know what this is like, good and bad,
Yes.
you know, and you need to weigh those two and decide what it's really like. But for this one, it was really the harshest parts of like, yeah, when we're not getting along, I isolate, and I do not want to be, I just want to be by myself to think about things.
Yeah.
Talk about that way back on the Blue Hour too. There's a song called An Empty Room about how I just need to be alone in order to get anything done. I can't do it in a room with other people. I need my alone time.
Sure.
And we have a great system for that. We figured out early on how that works, and she spends a lot of time editing, her photos. She's doing photo shoots and then editing her photos. She'll go do it at like Starbucks or something so that I can be in the studio doing stuff here. And then when we're ready, it's like, okay, now you switch with me and I'm going to go do this. And you're going to come here and do this stuff. And we have a pretty good system for that. Okay. But anyway, my point being, I like to be alone.
Sure.
I need to be alone. She doesn't like that. She wants to be in the moment. She wants to discuss it. She wants to get through it. And I'm just realizing how difficult that can be.
Yeah, for sure. So this is the song that I was telling you about, and I might be totally off on this. But when I first heard this, it happened instantly. When I first heard this song, because I didn't know the lyrics yet enough to be singing this song, but I found myself singing 2 other songs of yours.
Really?
And it happened every time I listened to it.
Huh.
Without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
The song would be over and I'd be off at work doing something or whatever. And I find myself singing these 2 other songs. And, let's see, I wrote them down because, so one of them is Tonopah.
Huh.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other one was one I couldn't think, and this is why I was looking up lyrics this morning.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to find what song this was, because the lyric that I kept singing was the one in a leaky boat you can be the captain, or I forgot the exact words, but I had that in there and I was like, what song was that? So I was trying to find it, and then it's Be Here Now. Right? And then I saw it. So those are the 2 songs every time. I don't know what it is.
That's funny.
Something about somewhere in that song, it puts the same kind of melody or the same something about it. I don't know what it is.
That's funny because I thought whatever you say, you're going to point out, and I'm going to be like, oh God, it's the same chords. But both of those are not, they're completely different. And so I wonder maybe it's the rhythm, or maybe it's the way that
Who knows, man?
The things I gravitate
towards. It could be like
towards.
the tone of your voice. I mean, it could be anything. It could be the...
This is one that when I played it for Weston early on, he said it reminds me of the Great Dipso Drought.
Okay, interesting.
Really? Because that didn't cross my mind at all. Obviously, I'm not thinking about things I've done in the past and how it relates to those. But when he pointed it out, I thought I could sort of hear that, I guess.
Yeah.
And his conclusion of listening to this album for the first time was, it sounds like the first album you've made where everything you've ever done is represented musically.
Yeah, and I agreed with that.
And obviously not intentionally. It's not like I thought that. Yeah. But sure, it goes.
But it's coming from the same
place.
creative mind, so you're going to have similarities anyway. Even though you're creating something new, you're still the same person.
Yeah.
Right. So for sure. And then I love the gang vocal harmony thing in there when it comes in. That's really cool.
That was cool. Our friends Kylie and Noah, who just moved in right down the street. They're like our neighbors now.
Is that how you met them, or did you know them before that?
No. We've known Kylie for many years, and then met Noah when she started dating him. And then he plays music. He's a local singer-songwriter, and so we're like, hey,
there you go.
We got stuff to talk about. And so, like I said, because all of this was a surprise for Allie, I asked them one day when she was at a wedding, do you guys have time today to come by the studio and just sing this little background part?
Okay.
And so they came in, and we had a really fun time just putting that together. And then they rush out of here, and Allie pulls up like 10 minutes later and has no idea they were here. And it's like, that was really cool.
You're probably sweating bullets.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's awesome. All right. And then we move on to A Standard.
Yep.
Which is my second favorite song on the album.
Oh, okay.
We haven't got to my first. You already know what it is, of course, but we haven't got there yet.
I'm out here looking for answers and swimming blind through the deep. I hold myself to a standard I couldn't possibly keep. I hold my breath underwater. I hold my stress in my neck. When I hold my face at an angle, I can see the cause and effect. Always looking to you to be my drink in the desert heat. I know it's unfair for me to ask you for anything. I stand stand up straight like a dancer. I can't complain, but I might. We sing along to a standard I couldn't possibly write.
Again, very clearly about Allie, I think, in this one,
Yeah.
right? And it sounds like you're talking about a lot of what I'm assuming are actual stories about your car breaking down and
Yeah.
then her dad coming to pick you up and all this kind of stuff. So is that like, how early on in a relationship was that?
6 months.
Okay.
Very early on.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like a whole, basically, like probably the first ballady one I wrote for this album. And it's like, does this fit on with the rest of them? And eventually came up with some stuff that I liked about it and started playing with it and realized it's a lot about just holding myself to a very high standard. And again, how difficult that can make being around me.
Right.
It's just like, yeah, that's tough. But she's also the same way. Like,
Sure.
we are both very hard on ourselves, way more than other people are hard on us.
Right.
We expect a lot out of ourselves. And, we both grew up high achievers, and then, with age and stuff, you start to realize like, oh, that doesn't always pay off. Like, you can work hard on something and still get overlooked for an opportunity, get passed over for a job or something, or, and also just work really, really hard on a thing. And then your parents look at it and go, yeah, that's neat. And you're like, oh man, it's never good.
Right.
And it's not them, it's you. It's
Sure.
an internalized pressure. So it's, me accepting that part of myself. But then also like, memories like that. I was thinking about this time that we had gone camping at Lopez Lake, and I don't know, 10 or 11 at night or something, where like we need to go into town to get food, or there was something that we didn't have, or maybe our flashlight batteries died and we're like, oh no, we better go into town. And so we're driving from, Lopez Lake is way out there.
Sure.
We're driving towards Arroyo Grande, and the truck broke down in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing around us, and we had to walk, and we had to knock on a random door and ask to use their phone. Neither of us owned a cell phone. Had to knock on a random door and ask to use their phone, and called her parents to come out. And when he showed up, I was just panicked that he's going to be so mad. He's going to be so disappointed in us. And how could you? And when he got there, he was so calm. Yeah. And he was just like, all right, let's take a look at it. And he's like, oh, it looks like this is, probably the alternator or something. And I guess we should just leave it here and I'll take you guys home. And he was so cool about it. And when I got home, I cried.
Okay.
It was just like, realizing that I've put a lot of this pressure on myself and
for nothing.
And that in a situation like that, you can be calm and you can deal with things like that. And I thought, man, that was a real life lesson for me is, hey, not everybody's going to be upset with you because of something that was out of your control.
Right.
It's okay. Like,
well,
it's
you're probably really
right.
trying to impress him in a sense at that point too. I mean, you're obviously into his daughter and you're like,
how
I hope he likes
embarrassing,
me.
How embarrassing. I take your daughter camping and then we break down in the middle of nowhere late at night.
Yeah.
And so, it was like,
in your truck,
in my
it
truck,
was your truck.
Yeah.
See, so that's your fault. You don't keep enough better upkeep on your own vehicle.
Right.
See?
Right.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I know that. I get that. I mean, I won't go into too much of it, but my relationship with Bethany's dad was very much like that. In fact, one of the first times I went to visit her in Apomo, and she had asked her dad, "Hey, can Ryan come over?" I had never met him, never even seen the guy, never met him. "Hey, can Ryan come over and hang out for a while and see me?" And he goes, "Only if he brings me a cheeseburger." That's literally the first thing, right? So I was like, okay. And I was already like almost in a Pomo when she let me know that, right? So, and there's no fast food in a Pomo at that time.
Yeah.
This is way back in the day. This is like 96. So I drove all the way back to Santa Maria, got a burger, like Jack in the Box or something, came all the way back and gave it to him. That was the first time I ever met him.
Wow.
But he's always been that kind of guy who, like, you and Bethany would tell you this too about growing up. He's hard to please. Like her whole life, she constantly felt like she was trying to make him proud. And it was like one of those things where you didn't always get that from him, which made you strive even harder, you know? So for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like with my dad, it's not that I think he's hard to please. It's that I don't think he really expresses himself when he is proud.
Sure.
He doesn't always tell me.
Yeah.
So it's like I always feel like I'm trying to achieve it, but it's not necessarily that I'm not making him proud. It's that even if I am, he doesn't really know how to tell me that. He's a lot more focused on day-to-day things, and he'll tell you what he did that day and which store he shopped at and what he ate for breakfast, but he won't really be like, oh, hey, by the way, it's really impressive that you got a murderer put away. Like, he doesn't tell me stuff like that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get an attaboy for that one, right?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. So Left on Lupin is the next. And,
signed on the solid line. It got real when it hit my mind that the saving and the paving were behind me. The taste, did my parents taste something stale when they bought that place with the tree house and the swing set in the 90s? I've never felt so much pressure not to die. And us, with our self-employed artist deals that we both enjoy, and a mortgage that's like 3 times what I'm pulling. But still, when we saw that yard, I got feels in my debit card. It's the first place and the last place, and we're rolling. I've never felt so much pressure not to die. I've never felt so much pressure not to die.
This one has got some really cool lyrics in it. I mean, I think anyway, because it's very obviously about you guys signing the papers. You know, it's a very big step.
Yeah.
And the main thing you keep saying is, "I've never felt so much pressure not to die."
Yeah.
Which is just awesome. I mean, because it makes sense, right? Especially when you understand what the song's about. You know,
Yeah.
it's like you just made this purchase, this life. I mean, 30 years is usually what a loan is, right?
Yep.
These days for a house, and it's like, that's a big commitment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, well, now I can't die.
Yeah.
You know, because
Right.
then what is she going to do, right?
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
But there's just some really, and one of the things you do in here is and I know this is on purpose because I know you, but you breathe in,
Yeah.
right? Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's very deliberate,
Yep.
very on purpose. And is that like to signify that the kind of stress of
Yeah.
the situation? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like just breathe. Okay, just breathe.
Yep.
You also say you sign on the solid line, which the term is here, sign here on the dotted line.
Yep.
Solid is more permanent.
Yeah.
Right. It's like that's it.
Yeah.
Right. That's the real deal.
And the paperwork we filled out had a literal solid line, and I was like, I should be specific.
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay. Very cool.
But yeah, I wrote that the day we came to look at this house. So we lived at the apartment.
Okay.
We drove over here, checked it out, and then we're like, I love it. I love it so much. And the yard was what sold us too.
Yeah.
It's like, the house was fine. We had loved the house, but then we walked out back and we're like, oh my gosh, there's four little buildings that were originally like a workshop and a she shed, and there's a barn.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, one of these is a recording studio, one is a photography studio, one is a storage space. This is so cool. We could rent one out. We could
Yeah.
have somebody live back here.
Yeah.
So that was what really sold us, is the yard is so cool.
Yeah, something like it was
And-
designed for you guys.
yeah. And so we drove around and talked about it, like, are we doing this? Because
Yeah.
we had been talking for a long time about wanting to get a house because we felt like we're just throwing this rent money away. We're paying, rent is so much in California.
Oh my gosh.
And in this area. And we were technically it started out low income housing. And by the time we got out of there, we were paying like $1,700 a month. And so it's like, we're just throwing this money down the drain. It's not going towards equity.
Yeah.
And if we had a house, we'd basically still be paying about the same amount, but it would be chipping off at a big principal that we were owing less on, and we could resell it eventually.
Right.
And
Right.
so we had talked for a long time, but we hadn't looked. And this was the first house we came to look at. Instantly fell in love with it. And then we tried to look around and we're like, no, it's that
Yeah.
one. It's that one.
Did you guys have a
And
battle? Were there other people trying to bid on this one?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
But we did it right at the peak of COVID. It was May of 2020
Hmm.
when we came to look at it, and it was like, oh, this is perfect timing because we had to wear a mask to come in, and they had to Lysol everything, and we had to sign things with gloves on and all
boy.
that. So each person that did come in had to go through that. So it probably weeded out people who might have bought faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we even offered below the asking price because we're like, let's just see what happens, and we got it for what we offered.
Very
and
cool.
so anyway, we just, once we saw it, instantly knew we wanted it, and it just set in that panic and anxiety in me, like, uh-oh. And we had our inspection, our home inspection for the first time, and the guy's like, the the floorboards creak at some parts. It's an old original hardwood floor from the 50s, and you got a leak in your chimney. And we found some like dried things in the attic that may be rat droppings.
Okay,
We didn't
yeah.
see any rats up there, but you might have rats. And so you want to look into that. Like this door doesn't close all the way, and you're going to need to fix that because it's a fire hazard.
Yeah.
And so when we went home that day, I wrote the bridge just straight out. I just laid out all the things he wrote
Yeah.
in his inspection report, and it was finished. So
Okay.
I wrote the song before we had even officially moved in, just in the
funny.
moments of us signing the contract.
And that's what
So-
the like it, love it, gotta have it.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is also
Cold
that's a
Stones.
reference to Cold Stone sizes like that. And then I got a bunch of our friends from
Yeah.
the very beginning of our relationship all the way through to now to send me them singing this background part.
Oh, nice.
And dropped them in, and she didn't know. And I thought it'll just be cool to see that many people's names next to each other.
Okay. So they sang that part all individually, and
Yep.
then you put them all together
Yep.
to make it sound like the gang vocal?
Yep.
Okay. Cool, man.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And that was also the first song I ever played for anybody from the album. I played it acoustic at a little gathering in Shell Beach, and Allie was
Okay.
there, and so everybody heard it. And from that point on, every time I see this group, they're like, "What's that song about your
Yeah.
house? When is that song coming out about you buying a house?" Because it's so relatable to anyone
Right.
who's ever bought
Yes.
a house.
Yes.
And I was like, "Well, that's good to hear," because I thought I was the weirdo, but everybody who heard it was like, "That's exactly how I felt."
Yeah.
Like that's cool.
Okay.
So
Very cool, man. Yeah, I'm really starting to like this one too. I liked it for the lyrics to begin with, but then the sound is really growing me.
it's also one that when I was recording it, I thought this is kind of a Beck song.
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
trying to go for that sort of tone.
Which
of like,
era of Beck? 'Cause
like
he's gone through a lot of changes too.
Mid '90s Beck,
Okay,
I
okay.
guess.
Gotcha. I could go on a whole tangent about him, but I won't. So the next one's called Waiting Room.
If heaven is a waiting room and we won't have bodies, how will I find you there? How will I find you there? If nothing's coming after this and we're all just rotting, coming right next to me, we can both form one tree. And when all the world's in front of me, I swear I won't give it up. I am more than what these angels say I am. Hey, hey. If heaven has a waiting list and you weren't invited, how can I hide you there? How can I hide you there? If no one's looking after us and we're all just sliding right next to me, we can both slide home free. And when all the world's in front of me, I swear I won't give it up. I am more than what these angels say I am. Hey, I know half the world is sliding by, but I swear I'm not giving up. I am more than what these rulers say I am.
And now this is one of those things, as we've talked multiple times about all your albums, there's always a song, it happens on almost every album. When I first listen through, maybe second listen through, I always say, this one's my favorite right now.
Yep.
And then I have one, this is my least favorite.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of times that one that's originally my least favorite really starts to grow on me.
Wow,
So
yeah.
that's this song
Yeah.
for me.
Interesting.
The first listen through, I didn't really care for this one very much. I was like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's not bad, but I mean, compared to all the other ones on there, it's like, it's kind of low.
Yeah.
But now, after like however many times I've listened through now, because I really, that's by the way, that's one of the things I love to do,
Yeah.
and it's amazing to me to watch how I can listen through an album multiple times, and so many things change, so many
Yeah.
things happen, so many things hit me a certain way, and that's why people that go, I listened to that album once, I don't care for it, I'm not going to listen to it again.
Yeah.
I'm like, can you imagine? I mean, you know how many albums are my favorite album right now? Like one of my all-time favorite albums that if I would have done that, I would have never listened to it again, and that would have been it. So anyway, yeah, this one's really, really starting to grow on me now.
Wow.
So a lot of kind of spiritual, maybe symbolic stuff in this one.
Yeah. This is one that I wrote early on, demoed early on, and then cut from the album. And so when I started getting towards the end of like, here's the official batch of songs, this was not on there. And then I have a friend named Anton who helped with a lot of this album, and I kind of used him as a sounding board whenever I was unsure, which was constantly, I don't know about this one. I don't know if this album's working. I don't know if this order of songs is right. And he's a super positive person. He would just talk me out of everything. And we were talking about collaborating on a song. Like, we should do something together. And he's like, you got anything? And I was like, actually, I have this song that's like, it's a full song, but it's not good enough for my album. It just doesn't fit. And so, want to do it? And he said, yeah. And I said, let me go out to the studio and I'll record it from scratch. I'll just do a nice, clean recording. I'll send it to you and you do whatever you want with it. And then we'll send it back and forth till we like it. And he's like, cool. And I spent the whole day in here working on it. And by the time it was done, I was like, this is the best song on the album.
Really?
I can't give it away anymore. Like, it's just, I really, really like, so I had to tell him, like, I'm really sorry to do this to you, bud, but I think it's going back on the album. And he was so encouraging about it. Like, oh, totally, dude, totally. But then I thought it really does fit because, for one, it's about the future. It's about death. It's about Allie. It has all the themes of this album represented. And then the way it came together, especially once I got this string quartet to play on it. And I really liked the way that it came together with all that it just has... It has a different sound than a lot of other songs I've done, but it sounds more like stuff I listen to. It reminded me of like The National, who's one of our favorite bands collectively, and bands like that where it just has a different sound to a lot of other stuff. And I was starting to play around with a lot of this, like these tape reels and stuff, and plugging in microphones to things and just tapping on stuff and making noise. And so from the opening moments of this song, you can just hear all these like clicks and pops and little buzzes and whistles and stuff. And I just love that textural stuff.
Sure.
But then I also just thought thematically, it's a very powerful statement to Allie. Just this idea of it, and it was an actual, not panic attack, but it was just a thing I was doing as I was driving to work one day many years ago. I just had this idea of what happens when we die and we get up there and we're not in bodies anymore. How am I going to find her again?
Right.
And I just thought, wow, that's like a Hallmark card if I could figure out how to say that. It's a very sweet sentiment, but it came from fear. It came from like, I don't know what to do without you. Even when we're dead, like, what do I do without you? And I thought, wow, she would probably love to hear that, but I'm not always great at articulating myself in the moment. But I thought if I can write a song, then, and it came out very soon after that. So yeah, it was one that I had tossed in the junk pile and then stole back. I was like, sorry, this got to go on there.
Do you still feel like it's the best song on the album?
Not particularly, but it's one that I definitely feel like is solid. That if you were only going to hear one song from the album and you heard that, I'd feel pretty good that you're probably going to get a good idea of it. Yeah,
it's funny, the chorus, or I think it's the chorus, but something about it, like I said, it's grown on me, and that chorus kind of hits me in the feelers now. I don't know.
Yeah, the chorus came out of like how much our lives changed once I got, I was on TV for a little while and stuff and all these things, and being still resolute in this idea that like no matter how much things change, I'm not giving up on this. Like, this is you and I, and we're doing this thing. Nice. And so,
All right. Beneath You, another favorite. This one's also very obviously alluding to Allie.
I am at my core beneath you. I mean in every single way. And though it's never coming from you, I'll disappoint you every day. It's like I know I'm supposed to breathe, but don't know how I'm supposed to breathe. This is the best that I can be. I'm on the floor to greet you. Hey, I got nothing done today. And can you help me roll my sleeves up? I tend to panic when I play. And though it's probably hard to see, we've done a ton of work on me. This is the best that I can be. Really. And are you calling that a win? Are you calling that a win? Are you calling that a win? Ooh. Are you calling that a win? Are you calling that a win?
But this one, it seems like you're putting her above you in a sense of saying, you know, almost like I'm not, you're too good for me.
Yes.
Kind of a sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And like, I think this is the last song I wrote for the album, or one of the two last songs I wrote. That I didn't write this one till we moved in here and had been here for a few months, and knew the batch of songs for the album, but still felt like there's more coming. And this is one that came out just whole, like not with lyrics, but just the whole structure came out. And I knew the idea was, I had the first line, I am at my core beneath you. And it's basically a song about trying to convince her to at least really think about whether she wants to spend the rest of her life with me.
Now, do you really have these? I got to ask you, because you keep saying this.
Yeah.
Do you really think she feels that way? Do you think she's sitting there going, man, I don't know.
It's not about how she feels. It's
throwing
about
my life away with this guy. I don't know.
It's about whether I want to make sure that she's thought it all through,
Okay.
I guess.
Right.
It's basically me laying out, like, you know, being married to me isn't going to be amazing all the
Right,
time, and
right.
and she knows that. We're very realistic
course,
people,
of course.
but just like one last shot at, like, are you really really sure?
Right.
And why me? Just why
Yeah.
me? I mean, just from a base level, I don't have like a basic income like
Sure.
a lot of regular people do.
Sure.
I don't have a job that I go to. Everything I do is my own thing.
Yeah.
But she's always like, yeah, but me too. And I'm like, yeah, but you're super successful at it. That's the thing, is like, you are driving your business forward. You're
Right.
taking in a lot of income.
Yes.
You will always have enough money for the next mortgage payment. And
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's different between us. And so it's a real gamble. And it's like, why would you... And this is just a traditional thing for the woman marrying the man. Why would a woman want to marry a man who makes less money than her, who doesn't have a real job, who doesn't have any real, I don't want to say prospects, because it's like, yeah, there's lots of things I could do,
Sure.
but there's no real path.
Yeah.
It's just like, what's going to happen next? But maybe part of being with me is the excitement of that for her, that like, it's very much how I've always been from the moment she met me. Was I was a local musician that she had come to see play, and she knew me as that guy. The first time she was in a band and wanted to book a show, she's like, you got to get Chris Lambert on the
Yeah,
bill, because
yeah.
people will come see him. So eventually, once we were dating each other, maybe the excitement of being in a relationship with somebody like me is, you never know what that guy's going to do. And sometimes it really works out. Sometimes he takes a huge gamble on a thing and ends
Right.
up, you know, quitting his job to focus on it
you
full
go.
time, and
Yeah.
ends up on the nightly news or something.
Yeah.
But then what's next? And for me, that's what it's all about, is, yeah, but what's the next 5 years going to look like?
Sure.
What's the next 20 years going to look like? So I think it's a song about, in the chorus especially, are you calling that a win?
Yes.
Like, are all these things I'm listing, is that something you really want? Okay, like, I guess so.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And that's an earworm song. That
Good.
chorus. Are you calling that a win? I
Yeah.
find myself singing that all over the place.
Really?
Yeah.
I like that.
And I'm like, what? Are you calling what a win? What are you talking about?
And this is the song I was telling you that I don't know if you've listened through headphones, but it opens with a field recording of these bees that invaded our apartment when we lived there in 2018. 2016.
I didn't catch it. I have listened through headphones, but I didn't catch it.
Yeah, so we had to call an inspector over to take a look at her, an exterminator, to come take a look, because it's like, there are bees coming into our house and all the windows and doors are shut, and just one at a time. It's like, there's another bee in here.
Yeah.
And I've never been stung by a bee. So when I see a bee in my house, I'm like, oh no, here it comes.
You don't know if you're allergic.
Yeah. So I just avoided them. And
you don't want to go out like that kid from My Girl.
I know. But we stayed at a motel for a few days and came back, and it's like, yeah, there's dead bees all over the place now. And what is going on? And when they finally did come in, they pulled the, I think it's called the range hood off the top of our stove. And there were thousands of bees in there.
They had a hive in there, right?
They had built a hive in there, but then they couldn't get back out, so they were dying in there. And that's why they were trying to come out through our apartment. They were coming down through the vent. And one at a time they'd come in, and once they were in, they couldn't get out, so they'd die in there. And so when they finally came in and they popped the little thing off, this pile of bee bodies fell onto our stove. And I took a picture of it, and if you look at the album artwork really closely, that's a pile of some of the bees.
Oh, no way. That's an actual picture?
That's an actual picture of three of
the
the
that's
bees
so cool.
that were on our stove. So anyway, when they were in the walls, he's like, put your ear to the wall. Listen to this. And so he put our ear to the wall, and you hear... like, no way. How many are in there? So when he left, I grabbed my little field recorder and pressed it against the wall and recorded like a full minute of these bees just going. And it's like, can you believe this is in our walls? What is happening? I've never heard of this happening to anybody else. It's like, were your walls infested with bees? So I've had that recording ever since, and I was listening back to it, and I just thought, I'm going to try to use this as a texture in the background of a song. So I laid that down, and I started drumming over the back of my acoustic guitar and just built this loop around that. And so if you listen, the very first thing you hear in that song is the bees, and it's hard panning from left to right ear. So sometimes when you listen in a car or something, it moves so fast that you can't really hear it. But if you put on headphones, it sounds like they're swarming back and forth around your head.
Cool.
So
anyway. Cool. I'm going to check that out then.
Yeah.
I'm going to definitely check that out.
But just a textural thing, and also a callback to our earlier relationship.
I can't go past this before we move on to the next song. For the instruments here, you have digital garbage.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So this is what that means. It's a plugin in Pro Tools that it basically takes the sound that you've made and it just crushes it. It just makes it crushes it down to an unrecognizable sound. And then it kind of loops it rhythmically. So if you listen through headphones again, you'll just hear it as like a noise, like a synthesized noise that kind of moves back and forth. And carries on.
That's not what you sent me as the clip, is it? From the last episodes we did? Okay.
No.
Okay. Because I want to know where that comes into.
That was the guitar solo from Blow.
It was?
Yep.
Interesting.
And it's this little this red pedal right here.
Okay.
It's called the Digitech Whammy pedal.
Okay.
It's when you step on it, it drives up the pitch of the noise you're making. So like if I'm playing one note and I step on it, it goes wow, wow. And like Jack White from the White Stripes kind of made this a famous pedal. And the band Vampire Weekend just put out an album this year that I loved. It was like very well produced, and he talked about using this pedal all over it. And I'm like, okay, I've been putting it off for years. Finally going to buy this pedal. And the day I did, I used it to record the guitar solo on Blow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So now we're at Do You Listen?
Yep.
Which is obviously the best song on the album. Very, very country. Very, very country. And I love the sound of it. That was the first thing that drew me to it, but it's the lyrics that hit me the most.
Yeah.
And as I was telling you, songs about nostalgia and like the way things were, like right, I missed before, right? Like it's just that kind of stuff always gets me because as I was telling you, I'm constantly living in that place. Yeah. I mean, I'm always there. I'm always, no matter where I'm at in life. And it's funny because the places in life that I reminisce about now and wish I was still there, when I was at that place, I was reminiscing about the times before that.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's a certain time in my life where it's like, oh, that was the best time. That's the only place to be. It's just like, I just can't seem to ever be satisfied in the present.
Yeah.
Until I'm past that present, and then that present is the past. And then I'm like, oh, I missed that time.
Yeah. It reminds me of the line in The Office where Andy Bernard says, I wish there was a way that you knew you were in the good old days while you were still in them.
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah, I get that.
Right. Or that meme that goes around Facebook that always makes me tear up where it says, I don't remember exactly what it says, but it says something along the lines of, there was a time, you didn't know it then, but there was a time where that would be the last time you were all together in the same place or something. And it shows this picture of these friends. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so true.
I saw one that said, there was a day where you played in your backyard, played imagination games or something in your backyard for the last time and you didn't know it. And like,
exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So I've always been that way. I dwell on that. So anyway, that's why lyrically this song really hits me. Yeah. You know, and it's obviously, again, about Allie, personal. It's letting each other borrow records. She brings you a mixtape or whatever, right? Is that this one, the mixtape one? Yeah. And you say you lost some of her albums or whatever. Is that so? I assume this is all true.
All true.
Yeah. What albums were those? Do you remember?
In the Aeroplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel. Okay. There was a band called that's spelled 3 exclamation points. Okay. I think that she let me borrow. Iron and Wine.
Speaking Sanskrit or something right there.
Iron and Wine, but I can't remember which album it was. Okay. There might have been a Fleet Foxes one. Okay. But yeah, we met up at a coffee shop in the mall, a Coffee DM when it was in the mall. Oh, nice. And traded vinyl records. It's like, here, you borrow mine, I'll borrow yours. And then like a year later or something, I was like, did I ever give you that back? Because I can't find it. And I dug all through my closet and was like, I'm so sorry. And I think I bought her new ones, but I think we have most of those on our shelf.
Okay, you replaced them eventually. Yeah. How did you lose? Did you lose them all at the same time? Like, did you leave your car unlocked and somebody stole them?
No, I think they're probably still in a closet at my mom's house somewhere. Oh, okay. I think they just got overlooked. They're in a box. And it might have been that I even found them later on and just was like, oh, we already replaced these, so we don't need them anymore. Yeah. I'm not sure, but yeah, definitely I felt bad, and she was very forgiving of that. But and then I met her, like I said, she used to come to my shows and I'd see her there and stuff. And, but the first time she reached out to me and asked if I would play a show with her new band, I was like, yeah, I've never officially introduced myself. Like, hi, nice to meet you. Like, I know I've seen you around and I know who you are, but we've never talked. Picked her up and we went and tried to book a show together, and it was the first time we'd ever been together. And a few months after that, for Christmas, I was working at Kinko's at the time, and she came in and I was like, hey, and she's like, hey, I brought you a Christmas present. And it was a cassette tape that she had made me, a mixtape. And she had done like this handmade collage over the top. She had cut things out from magazines and stuck it to the cover and wrote the track listing and did a little label on the face of it. And I still have it, and I sent it to her a few months ago, and she immediately started crying and like, I haven't heard this in forever.
So like she picked certain songs that she thought you would like, maybe? Or?
I think so. And I think she did it for a lot of friends. I think that was sort of her thing. But the fact that I was included, it was like, oh wow, I just got to know this girl, and she's already like making me mixtapes and stuff.
So if she was sitting right here right now, and I was to ask her, hey Allie, was that kind of like a pickup line, or would you think she would say yes? Or
no,
like, no, that wasn't it right then. Yeah, it was just being friendly.
Yeah, just being friendly. But like I said, the fact that she included me as one of her friends that early on, enough to come to my work to give me a Christmas present, it's like, hey, like you're really cool. Yeah. I knew she was really cool. You know, for years she helped me set up the Great Dipso Drought album release show. Yeah. And that was over like almost a year before we even started dating. Right. So she was always around, and we were always doing stuff together, setting up shows and all that, and trading music and stuff. And that was one of the things we bonded over early on is, she loves to listen to albums. So I gave her the Frightened Rabbit. We were just talking about Frightened Rabbit. Yeah. Gave her one of their albums on a burned CD. Sun Kill Moon was a band, and for her birthday, I gave her just my burned copy that I listened to in my truck constantly. I just popped it out and handed it to her. Like, this album got me through a lot. Hopefully you like it. Okay. So we just love trading music. But so the song is basically about the idea that as we've gotten older, we've sort of changed, and we've not grown apart, but we've both developed different tastes and things. And just me realizing at some point, she doesn't really listen to new music anymore, and and
you're sad about it in a sense, right?
That I just feel left behind. That it's like this was a thing we used to love to do, and now when she does, like, you know, she drives all over the state now. She shoots weddings from the Bay Area down to like San Diego and back up, and so she has long drives. And I ask her sometimes, like, what do you listen to? And she's like, nothing. Like, I mean, sometimes I have the radio on and it's playing quietly, but I'm really just thinking. And sometimes I listen to podcasts and all that. But even when she does put music on, it's usually something she's already familiar with, and it's quiet, so she's not really focused on it. I asked her, because I was borrowing her car to listen to the test mix of this album. And I said, what volume level do you, when you listen to an album, like what volume level do you do? And she said, like 8. And so I turned it up to 8, and I was like, I can't even tell there's music playing in here. It's like I have to get it up to 20 before I can even, like 20 is like really good. Like that's where I would consider, if I was really into the album, maybe like 22. She listens at 8, and she's like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's, it was like, no, listen to 8. And I turned it down and let her hear it. And she's like, yeah, that's how I listen to music. I know that's
because
also
it's just
how
background noise for her.
And that's sometimes how she watches TV too. She'll turn the TV up and she'll turn the volume up to like 20. And I'm like, listen, you got to get this up to 50 or 60. And so anyway, she's just not into music the same way that she used to be. I think she still appreciates it, but she doesn't really have like a drive to like check out what came out this week and listen to this new, even by bands she loves. It's like, have you listened to that new album yet? And she's like, no. So I found that I got her a Spotify subscription, and she started listening more since I did that. But it was just something that a few years ago came out in this really insecure way of like, hey, we used to love this thing together, and now you don't really seem to love it anymore. And I haven't changed. I still am constantly listening to whatever comes out. But even like I said, a lot of bands she turned me on to, like The National, who I had never listened to before she told me that they were her favorite band, and gave me a CD, and I was like, oh yeah, I love this. And then we bonded over that band. And then the last like 4 or 5 albums they've put out, I'm like, did you ever listen to that? And she's like, no.
How funny.
Man, you got it. And so I've been not pushing, but I've been encouraging her to listen more. And I think she still really loves music, but she just doesn't have the time for it the way that she used to. It's not a priority for her the way it used to be. And so using that as a microcosm of just what it feels like to, we're changed. We've changed as people. I still love you, but like, remember this thing we used to have? We don't have that anymore. And I miss before.
I miss before. Yeah, that's the one that gets me.
And that was the last song I wrote for the album. So I wrote that in February of 2021. And it was just like I was taking a shower and I started singing this melody, and I got out and I was like, I got to record this right now because I have an idea. And I texted it to my friend the next day and said, is this good enough to go on the album? I don't know. It's like it sounds almost like a little country song. So maybe there's a way with instrumentation and stuff that I could play it as a country song. And so I really like the way it came out.
Nailed it. I tell you, it is much better than any country song Beyonce has ever done. So
thanks.
Good job, man.
Thank you.
All right, so this takes us to Turtles, second to the last song on the album.
This is a warning sign. I don't have anything you seek. I'll just be straight with you. I don't think anyone's unique. I'll be the quiet one. I don't know how we're here or why. They can keep saying things. We'll take a tally when we die.
seems to be another one about missing the old days. You got the TikTok sound going throughout the whole song.
Yep.
Kind of, again, that idea of time passing by.
Yep.
We'll
There's
go with that.
another one about anxiety, I think.
Okay.
Like mostly about just how things have changed for me over time, and I think specifically comparing myself to who I was 5 or 6 years ago when I did my last album, and it's like, man, I was really working on myself. I was journaling every day, and I was meditating, and I was really focused. And then obviously, a number of things changed in my life, and a number of things came out unexpectedly, came out of nowhere, and changed where I was at. And then I just at some point took a look at myself, and it's like, I used to be something, and like I would get better every day.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it's at. I don't know how it got away. And that's what I started. That was the first lyric I wrote, and just thinking, but I was never quite sure what the song was about. And when it clicked for me was when I realized that I'm singing this song to my future child. Like this, from my perspective, it's me basically trying to encourage my child to not live life the same way I have, which is kind of anxious and in fear a lot.
Yeah.
I had a line at one point about how, I don't remember exactly how I worded it, but something about how, you can't be afraid to get on roller coasters like I am. You can't, like all the things that, like the joys in life that other people have, that's like, no, I didn't do that because it's just always scary to me. It's like, don't be like that. And so I thought of turtles as a metaphor for the idea that you pull into your shell, this hard outer protective shell, and you just pull in. But then once you do that and it's comfortable, you just never want to.
Right,
it's like, I'm just going to stay in here.
Yeah.
So then I was like, I turtle from everything. I turtle from everyone, and trying to encourage, it, whether it's a kid I'm singing to or not, just don't be like this. And then when I got to the chorus, I had a completely different chorus for the song. It was in a minor key. At one point I had a guitar solo in there that just was really kind of show off guitar, which I don't do. I'm not a great guitarist, but I had this really, really kind of grunge metal sort of guitar solo in the middle, and I didn't like that, and I didn't like the minor key thing, and I played it for my friend Anton, and he's like, well, what if when you get to the chorus you just went to the major key here and just the root note, because you haven't hit the root note yet in the entire song. And I was like, that's a good point, but isn't it kind of boring? And he sort of showed me, here's how I would do it. And it completely changed for me. And so the chorus of the song is just the phrase, I don't know why I'm afraid, repeated. But if you read the lyrics in the booklet, the punctuation is different because every time I sing the line, I mean it in a different way.
Oh, interesting.
It's like, I don't know why, but I am afraid.
Yeah.
And then like, I don't know why, because I'm afraid.
Okay.
And it's like, I don't know why I'm afraid. Like, I'm afraid to say, but I don't know why. And so each time it comes out, it's a completely different thing. But the message just being like, this is what it's like to have anxiety. This is what it's like to have a disorder or panic attacks and stuff. It's like, I don't even know what I'm afraid of. I just know I feel this thing, like we talked about, an impending sense of doom.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I'm afraid. It's about fear of commitment. It's like, why haven't we gotten married yet? Why haven't we had a kid yet? It's like, I don't know why I'm afraid.
Yeah.
It's
I don't
all
either.
that. So
I've done it, man. It's not that bad. You should go for it.
But yeah, I think that line is sort of maybe the pull quote from this entire album. It's like the concept of this album is, I don't know why I'm afraid.
Okay. Nice, man. The last thing I wanted to say about this song is, again, because I assume this is on purpose, again, because I know you. At the end where you say, me and Allie Wallace on the living room floor.
Yeah.
When you say the word floor, your voice almost goes away.
Yep.
Is that on purpose?
That's the tape machine garbling the tape.
Gotcha.
And yes, definitely on
it's
purpose.
very prominent on that word.
Yes.
Like it almost sounds like literally your vocals just cut out.
Yep.
Almost at the end of that word.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. But it basically like that memory disappearing.
Okay.
Going, that was before. That's my
so
past
cool.
now.
That's really cool.
But yeah, and that line is specifically about, it's a photo that we have on our mantle, and it was when she lived in an apartment in Ventura for a while she was going to college, and then she decided she didn't want to go to that school anymore. She wanted to move back home, and we went down there, I think it was on Halloween, and we'd only been dating for 4 or 5 months at that point, and cleaned out the apartment, and when it was completely empty, we sat on the floor, and she set up a camera, and we just like pressed our foreheads together and took this picture, this like sickeningly cute picture of us just looking into each other's eyes. But also there was just a period of time where like, we were playing board games and like she never had furniture in that apartment. So every time we were together, we like baked a cake and she's frosting it on the floor. And it's like, there was a whole era of our life where it was just me and Allie Wallace on the living room floor.
Nice.
And yeah, that was the last lyric of this album that I thought of. I thought of this like 2 or 3 months ago. It popped into my head and I was like, man, that's maybe too bold.
Yeah.
To
literally say her full name.
Yeah. Our friend, when she heard the album for the first time, texted and said, I can't believe you named her like full first and last name.
Right.
It's like, yeah, well, there's no doubt that it's about her. I mean, some people have a song about Jenny or something.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, but not.
On the bathroom stall. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But so yeah, it's definitely like I thought.
Yeah.
I think if I do it, and it really was when she did hear the album, and there's so many songs that are about memories and things that I'm saying to her and my shortcomings and all this stuff. But I think that was the knockout punch. I think hearing that part, she was just like a little bit inconsolable for a long time after hearing that.
Bet, So she, before we get to the last song, I'll just kind of ask, did she, her thoughts on the album?
I don't know. Like we didn't really go in depth about them. I just know she sobbed the entire time, but she usually does just because of the heaviness of hearing everything I've been working on. But for this 6 years of me working on this simultaneously to everything else. It wasn't
sobbing like, after 6 years, this is all you've got to offer, really?
I hope not.
Yeah, I doubt
hope
it.
not.
Yeah. It's probably because it was so personal.
Yeah, I think she, and pretty much everybody who knows me, who I've played this for, have all come back and said, it's the best album you've done. Okay. And it's like, well, I also think that, but I always think each album I do is the best one I've done up to that point. Sure. But she's been very resolute in that this is the best album I've ever done. And I think she really believes that. Okay. And yeah, it's in a way, it's like a spiritual successor to Phoebe, which was about the beginning of us dating. This is like today, like what we're like and what the future is going to be for us and all that stuff. Yeah. So it's one that I knew that it would devastate her when I played it for her. And I also know that it's probably going to be not something she puts on a lot. Right. It's too much sometimes. It's like putting on Saving Private Ryan or something. Yeah. It's like, I don't know if I want to watch that on a Thursday night. Yeah. It's an event. Yeah. And so I don't know, it might take a lot out of her, but that's okay. Like I think it's really authentic. It's really like pure my thoughts and everything I feel and stuff, but it might not be an everyday listen.
Yeah. Yep. Cool, man. All right. We're at the final song. Feels Great to Be Great, which is all about how you're the greatest guy in the world and there's nobody better than you. Yep. Obviously, you've arrived and you look down on everybody else.
Is it a maze with one proper ending? Is it a wave and we're all just pretending? There's a past and a pending, and a rise and a fall. Are you aware that the edges are bending? So do you care about the weight of unfriending, or the time that we're spending building walls over walls? But it feels great to be great. That's what the movies and books say. You gotta get saved to be saved. Oh, and there's a wrong way. But I'm a speck, I divide into sections. Pain in the neck with recurring infections. No patience for questions, no patience at all.
No, I think this song is like the most poetic. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I could probably spend an hour just asking you about lyrics in this, but I won't. but yeah, there's just a lot of like really cool phrases in this song, I think, for me anyway.
Cool, yeah.
So what's going on in this one?
I don't know. This is one that when I wrote, I just knew it was the closing track. It just felt like, and this was before the title of the album was not decided on until way later. When I realized that I had used the phrase "be great" in a couple songs already, and I was like, wow, that's sort of the theme of the album. And so even before that was the album title, this song was called "Feels Great to Be Great." And I think the idea is that, you know, you get fed this narrative, especially when you're young, that it's like, if you do good, then the world's going to be good back to you.
Yeah.
And then you become an adult and you're like, nope.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
not what it's like at all.
Right.
And so that's why I say, you know, that's what the movies and books say.
Yeah.
It feels great to be great. But that's not true. Like, I think my conclusion, or maybe the whole, if you boil this entire album down, it's this idea of trying to be great is really exhausting, and it has to be self-driven. It has to be, like I said, it's this internalized pressure to be great. There's no reward, really. You know, it doesn't feel great to be great. It's a huge pain.
Yeah.
And you never, you know, if you're anything like me, you never feel like you've gotten there. Like, I've never felt like, oh, I'm a great person.
Right.
I'm great. I've always felt like, even when I'm at my best, I'm like, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Doing pretty good.
Yeah.
But there's people who are doing way better.
Sure.
And there's people who have done, you know, who have left a mark on the world of some kind, or left some legacy behind. Those are great people. And I'm way short of that. So it's like, yeah, even if you were to be great, I don't think it feels great. And I think that's what I think to close the album this way is basically just this idea that for everything that I've said here and all this trying to achieve greatness, it's not like if you do, it's going to be an awesome life. You just suffer through it and then you go, well, I did it. I'm great.
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah.
But it always felt like a closing track to me. It went through a few different iterations where it was just acoustic guitar and me singing. I thought it was sort of a sing-along song, or like a little ballad to close out the album, just a little folk song.
Sure.
And then I didn't like it, and everything I was doing with it didn't work. And my friend Anton was like, what if you try getting rid of everything except your voice, and then just do just build some kind of spaciness around it? So we pulled out, I've got this little thing called the omnichord, which is an 80s instrument. It's like a what do you call it? An auto harp.
Okay.
So you know what an auto harp is?
No.
Where you hold down the chord and you strum the strings. You've probably seen them. It's like a little board of wood with like 50 strings on it, and you hold down A minor and strum it with a little felt pick, and it goes like vroom, vroom. You've heard it before.
So it sounds like a harp, but
yeah, but you're holding down one button to be a key. So you
to make a
do
chord,
a D,
basically.
and it mutes every string that isn't in that key.
Oh, nice.
So you hold down the D, and it mutes everything that's not a D, an F sharp, or an A.
Well, that makes it easy then.
Yes, that's why they call it an auto harp.
Okay.
It's just basically an auto, but it's basically like a kid's instrument. They usually bring it to classrooms, and everybody plays it together. You hold down the chords, and everybody plays together and stuff. But it's not something you play a lot in adulthood. So when you hear it, sometimes you're like, oh, that's a cool sound. The omnichord is like the digital version of that. They tried to make it work in the 80s, and it really did not take off. But now it's a collector's item because people like me are like, that is a cool sound.
Yeah.
It's so weird. So I built it around just that, just me strumming. There's a little strip of metal you run your finger along, and just magnetically it goes ring, ring, and you hold down the buttons for the chords. I built it around that, and then I brought in some other weird noises. There's an optigon, which is like, it's similar to this, which is a mellotron, which is when you play each key, it's literally playing a cassette tape loop inside of it, and just rotating it forever. The Beatles played these on like Strawberry Fields Forever and stuff. It's a weird sound, but the optigon is similar, and it has this flute sound that just sounds really crackly, like dusty old flute recording, and I use that in the background. But then the more that I played it, I'm like, I kind of miss when it was just a folk song. And so I mixed the two together. So I took the whole spacey minimalist side of things, and I put it back with the acoustic guitar until it was all together. And then the weirdest thing on this is that little red length of plastic tube over there. It's called a whirly tube.
That's one of these, yeah?
Extend it and you go...
Okay.
That's in the chorus if you listen really closely.
Okay, I saw that in the list of instruments. Yeah, I was going to ask you what that was.
It's just a weird sound, and I thought it was a really cool way to arrange the chorus of this, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So it felt like a very
cool, man.
basic kind of folk song that sums up the theme of the whole record.
Okay. Where you say, I'm a speck and I divide into sections.
Yeah.
Do you know what I thought of as soon as I heard that lyric?
No.
Do you remember when you and I and Dale were talking about that experiment where they put the proton in,
photons,
the photon, that's what it was, and it split apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I don't know. You probably had nothing to do with you writing that lyric, but for some reason, that's what I thought of. So again, at the end of this song, there's another melody. Is that from another song? Is that, I was trying to figure it out. Is it Cool Hand?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the closing,
nailed it.
Yeah. When it starts doing that build up, those are the closing chords of Cool Hand.
Okay.
And then in that song, I sing I do this little falsetto line. And I had the trumpet player come in and play that on trumpet.
Okay. Perfect.
So it brings back that, and then the doon 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 doon. It's basically bringing back the end of the first song on the Blue Hour. Which
you did the first song of Constant Education, right? And then, really cool.
Yeah.
Very awesome.
A callback.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, man.
Sure.
That's it. Right. I wish I had more time, but I'm already out. So
cool.
I was like, hey, I'm glad I see what a mellotron is now, though.
Yeah.
Because, do you ever listen to the podcast Disgraceland? Have you heard this podcast?
I've heard of it. I don't know what it is.
You might dig it.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. It basically tells all the stories of like Hollywood, whether singers or even actors, writers, or whatever, and it talks about like the seedy, like undertones of a lot of that stuff, of what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah. Like I listened to one about Dennis Wilson's connection to Charlie Manson, like stuff like that. Yeah. But the guy that tells the stories is really good. But if you listen in the beginning of every episode, he goes, he'll talk about whoever it is, and like, and this is a person who makes great music, and he goes, that song you heard at the beginning of the episode. That wasn't great music. That was a something from my Mellotron called something B2.
Oh yeah, like a preset.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And he goes, and the reason I played that for you is because I can't afford the rights to whatever other song. And he goes, and why would I play you that song? Because that was the #1 song at the time that Charlie Manson and Dennis Wilson were something. Yeah. And every episode is that, but it's always a different #1 song or whatever. Yeah, it's kind of cool. So, but it's always the same with the Mellotron. But anyway,
I've wanted one for years.
Yeah.
Thank you again for checking out this bonus episode. Please tell all of your friends, and please send me a message telling me what you think. We will be back with a new conversation and the original format next week.